suppose it would help if I add myself to the stream here. I've done this before, guys. How's it going tonight? How are we doing? Let's see. I'm going to hop right over here to the chat. First of all, welcome to the garage. Thank you for coming in and spending another evening with us. Hopping an old blue and seeing where we go tonight. As many of you know, our guest is Preston Dennett tonight, and I'm extremely excited to dig into the very broad knowledge base that he has and so much that he's contributed to ufology as a whole. I'm very excited to dig into all that. But really quick, I'm going to give a shout out to those that have shown up in the chat already. It's not showing it on my end, but I know that Chad Smith was here first. So gold position is to Chad Smith. Second place is Thurston. Third place being Eddie Haskell. Thank you all so much for being here. Certainly not least or last year, we have Champ Campbell. We have Zero Cool. Excuse me, we have Don John Bovey. Very nice. Sun Saver, what's happening, brother? Wes H in the chat tonight says hello. Y says it's harsh time. Yeah, it is. I misread that, but Y is here in the chat tonight as well. We have Tony. Tony, what's up? What's up? He says, what's up, Big Willie? What's up to you, brother? Good job tonight, by the way. Being out with the boys here in the garage. And we know others will be hopping in here as we move along. If you guys could, really quickly out of the bat, I always like everybody to do this. If you could, hit a like. That helps us so much. Ring the bell so you get notified in case you ever forget. Or like today, I put up a late reminder for the episode. And if you're feeling really frisky, I'd love to ask you guys to please share this. I don't care how you share it, who you share it with, but just share it. And it does so much more than you guys know. It's how I found some of my favorite shows are just because somebody shared a link one time. I'm like, I'm going to go check this out. And then I fall in love with the show. So if you guys could do that for us, we'd appreciate it. Filthy says, hey, Big Willie, and I bid you adieu, good sir. How are you this evening? I think that's actually goodbye. But either way, thank you for coming and showing up in the chat tonight. Really quickly, too, guys, a couple of house cleaning things to get out of the way. I will not be here next weekend. I will be in Chicago with my family, my wife, going to a wedding. So we're excited for that, but I won't be around. For those that are listening podcast format, I don't believe it'll affect you at all. But for YouTube, I won't be here. The week after that, I will have, I believe, I should have had this pulled up already and ready to go for you guys. I believe it's Ron Felber. Could be for the incident in Mojave Desert. Let me just double check that. And I know Nicole Sackett will be my last guest before we start over at SOR and we start the After Hours show. So let me just check this really quick here. Let's see. That is on the 4th. Yeah. So that will actually be Nicole is my next guest. I do apologize, guys. And then after that will be Ron Felber. On the 10th, I'll be moving to Fridays. Paranormal Chop Shop and I will be kind of swapping places there a little bit. He's going to take over my Saturday slot. I'm going to take over his Friday slot. So speaking of that, hopefully the voice holds up. Otherwise, Preston, you're going to have to run the show tonight because I was in there for about 7 hours the other night, guys. As you guys know, the party always goes hard even after we've ended the show. All right, guys. So really quick, before we bring in Preston here, and I don't think I missed anything else. Obviously, if you guys would like, I'll throw this up. You can sow support for the UFOGaragePodcast.com. There you have tons of new merchandise I've been adding there, guys. All kinds of little fun stuff. A lot of stickers I'm really excited about. I still have koozies now. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free to do that. You can also support the show by doing super chats if you feel so to do. We'd appreciate that. That helps us out. And if not, that's okay. And you can also subscribe to the channel itself monthly, I believe for $1.99. And you get some super super stickers that no one else has access to. So, but enough about all that. Let's dig into what we're here for tonight. We're down the road. We already got old blue out, and let's just talk about Preston for just a second. So you guys have, in case you who are not familiar with Preston, I'll give you a brief background here of him. Preston Dennett began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 28 books and more than 100 articles about UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books are Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazines, UFO Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, Ufologist, Phenomena Magazine, Outer Limits Magazine, and others. He has written and translated into several different languages, including German, Portuguese, French, Russian, and Icelandic. Oh, very nice. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs. His research has been presented in the LA Times and LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He has taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. He currently resides in Reseda, California. To contact Preston, email him at preston@pacbel.net or click the link below. Guys, for anybody that's curious, I have the links to everything you might be interested in. So if you're listening in a podcast format right now, all those links are in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, again, all those show notes are in the link right there, including all of his books. I got one link for you, so it'll take you to all 28 of his books. And you can also check out his website and stay in touch with him that way. So without anything else to add, let's bring in Preston here tonight, guys. Preston, how's it going, brother?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you for coming in here tonight. And right off the bat, Tony or Anthony, thank you very much for the $5 chat. We really appreciate that. It helps us so much, and more than you guys know, honestly, in the background there. So that one time I was abducted by aliens. Hey guys, how's it going? We get a lot of listener interaction. So as we're going there out tonight, I'll throw up comments on the bottom for you in case you want to check anything out or see any comments that way. And a lot of times near the end of the show, I'll even open up the line sometimes if we have enough time to bring people on. Melissa says she is listening tonight. Oh, well, we appreciate that, Melissa. Thank you for hanging out with us. So first and foremost, Preston, like I mentioned backstage there, I really appreciate you making the time to come on here tonight. I know that we are all very busy these days, and it sounds like you yourself are a very busy man.
Hey, I love doing this stuff. So actually, it's an honor. I think this is an important subject, and very happy to see more and more people really picking up on this and getting interested in UFOs because they are real.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny that, well, I guess we'll get into some of that, but even with this day and age, with everything that's come out, a lot of the disclosure or soft disclosure that's been going on for years, it's still something that I'm glad to see is coming out more and more. Spooky, what's happening? How are you doing tonight? But it has been kind of brushed under the rug when anybody takes it too seriously. Is that fair to say sometimes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Cover up is no joke.
Yeah.
It is still active. There has been soft disclosure, but it's very soft. I don't think they're ever going to tell us the truth, honestly. I'm not holding my breath.
No. I mean, we hoped, right? I mean, it was kind of cool. I mean, I guess I still try to continually remind myself, and I've not been in this field very long at all. And I'm in no way, shape, or form a researcher, or presenter, anything like that. I'm just someone who's very curious about it. It fascinates me, and I believe it deserves more attention. But I sometimes do forget that even as novice as I am, there are those that have no clue about some of this stuff. So when stuff comes out, and it was a big disappointment, I think most anybody who's ever paid attention knew it would be with their supposed disclosure, even if it was just the preliminary event or preliminary documentation, it still was something for those that are, I guess, not paying attention at all. Still kind of think it's a joke. So I guess if nothing else, we can take that as a little bit of a win, even if it's frustrating because I don't know, the process that they go through is questionable at times, as you know very well. So
yeah, that was definitely the best thing that came out of it. It brought a lot of people into this field. So 100%. Pretty excited about that. Yeah.
So I guess let's start here before we really dig into this, because first of all, that was a very impressive resume. I apologize. Every time I read somebody's resume, I feel so bad. I usually murder it along the way. The poor lady we had on here last time, she had so many unique things that she had done. There were words I was reading that I had never even tried to read in my life, and it was a good time. But really quick for you have 28 books. So but before the 28 books, before everybody knew you as this person that your resume now reflects, this amazing career that you've started to build for yourself and just being on this journey and adventure, where were you? I mean, 1986 is when he said things started to change, but leading up to that, I'd love to hit on that if you're okay with it, of early years of Preston. What was going on in Preston's life, and what was his perception of this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it hit me when I was 21 years old, 1986. So I was a pretty young guy, but I did not believe in this stuff for a second. I was a diehard skeptic. Don't tell me you've seen UFOs. You're an idiot. I don't believe in them. Shut up. That's kind of my attitude. It was really rude and ignorant, but that's where I was at. I was very interested in science and astronomy and things like this. And I'm like, well, the stars are just too far away. That's all there is to it. UFOs are not taught in school. No one's taking this seriously. I don't want to hear it. And I remember I was probably 13, 14, well, maybe, 14 years old, I'm going to say, when my brother Mark comes running into the house. We're all, a lot of us are sitting at the table. I've got a pretty large family. There's six of us kids.
Nice.
And Mark's my older brother, 3 older brothers, an older sister and a younger sister. And Mark comes running in. He's a teenager. He's like 19 years old or so. Super excited. He's like, I just saw a UFO. And I just looked at him like, oh no. And he's like, no, really. It was, as low as the telephone poles. I'm like, shut up. I don't want to hear it. And I just kind of ignored him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't believe. I don't know. It was a tough subject for me to swallow. My sisters, they always believed it. And my other brothers never did. My brother Jamie went to his grave not believing in this stuff, really. But when I heard that report in the news in 1986, that changed everything.
So what was the report? Before we get to that, let me ask you this. Roughly what area of the country did you grow up in? Because I feel like that can play a big part into our perception of this topic at times. Was it a very Bible Belt area or?
For sure. Yeah, I think it did play a role, actually.
Oh, okay.
Because I actually was born in Chicago area.
Oh, very nice.
And I remember it. I remember those winters, even though we left when I was 6 years old. My family could not take the Chicago winters any longer, and we went west. Yeah, I remember it being so cold, water freezes before it hits the ground. But we went to California. So I grew up outside of LA here. And I think it did play a role because there are a lot of sightings here. In fact, the National UFO Reporting Center, New Fork, is a UFO reporting center, and California leads this United States in terms of number of UFO sightings. So yeah, a lot of UFOs hanging out here.
Now, do you think that when that report came up, let's hit on that, I guess. What was the report? What was the case that started to change some things, changed your, I guess, your whole perspective on maybe even your worldview at that time?
Oh yeah, it sure did. I'll never forget it. November 17, 1986. A good portion of the family's there watching TV, and it was Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw, one of those guys came on and started talking about this pilot who'd seen a UFO over Alaska in a Japanese commercial airliner. And that was really all they said. I mean, they showed his picture. They joked a little bit about it back and forth. You seen a UFO? No, haha. Laughed nervously and moved on. Turns out it's a really well-known case in the field. It has radar returns, multiple witnesses. It tracked their plane for over an hour. They requested a course change. It still followed them. It's a great case. None of that was in the UFO report, but they did show a picture of the pilot, Kenju Torochi. I remember looking at him thinking, that poor guy, that poor deluded pilot. How did he ever get in charge of flying a plane if he thinks UFOs are real? I thought he was seeing a reflection off the ice cap. That was kind of my go-to explanation. But that's when I remembered, like, Mark, my brother Mark said he saw one. I'm like, maybe I'll ask him about it again. And I did. Stupid me. Go up to him and I'm like, Mark, you heard about this crazy pilot? He's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, this pilot says he saw a UFO. He's like, I saw one. I'm like, yeah, I know. Tell me. And he kind of gives me this look like, all right. And he described this amazing sighting. And it really was. He was in his car with 2 friends driving down Reseda Boulevard, not far from where I live now, actually. And this was at night. They saw a UFO. It was a classic saucer, very low, metallic, colored lights, a dome on top. And they chased it down the street. Other cars were chasing it. It was totally silent. It was in view for about 15 minutes before it just darted like 10 miles away, and they lost track of it. But I'm like, man, oh man, are you kidding me? He's like, no, go ahead, ask Phil, ask Greg, his friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually did. I went and talked to them.
Just to double check, right?
I did, yeah. And they were so happy to talk to me. It's like, yeah, dude, man, you wouldn't believe it. And they described the same thing he saw.
Interesting.
I'm like, huh.
No, I guess is that what kind of, I guess that point then when the gear started, I mean, these were people that you trusted. These were people you found to be honest individuals, not someone that was prone to just making up a story to get attention. Is that, I guess, what's shifted your paradigm here a little bit?
Yep, that's found the little chink in my armor there. Because I'm like, well, I know Mark's not lying. I just know it. And I don't think he's misperceiving. I mean, these guys saw something, but aliens, really? So I started asking other family members. My brother Jamie's like, go away. You're crazy. And Stephen wouldn't even, and he's like, no, never seen anything. And my sister Victoria's like, no, I think they're real though. Don't you remember they were in the encyclopedia when we were kids? I'm like, no, I never saw that.
Yeah.
But I started asking friends. And I had a good family friend, Sylvia Walters. And she lived not too far away. And she's like, oh, yeah, I saw one, me and my friend. We heard it first. With this low buzzing noise. We went running outside, and there was this huge egg-shaped object moving over our house. I'm like, wow, 2 of you, really? Like, yeah. She's a pilot, by the way, and a scuba diver, a good witness.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh. I started asking everybody. And I found a lot of people I knew had seen them. And I brought it up at work. And Diane, they had worked with for years, is like, oh, yeah, me and my whole family saw this star-like object. It's darting around. And in walks Dorothy, who I love because she's like totally unfiltered and will tell you anything. And she's like, UFOs? Oh, one followed us home from the library. I'm like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, I was just a teenager, but me and my best friend were at the library. My mom picked us up. This object drops down out of the sky. It was right over the telephone wires. I'm like, shut up. She's like, no, for real. It had colored lights on it. It was metallic. My mom saw it. Talked to her, talked to my friend Carol, which I did, of course. But followed them home. They lived 5 minutes from the library. This is in Koreatown, very populated area. 1957, I think it was. So they go home, 5 minutes drive, and go upstairs and watch the UFO dart away and look at the clock. They left the library at 9:05. It's now 10:15. She turns to me, she's like, Preston, I don't know what happened to the time. I have no idea. It's like an hour disappeared. And I'm like, oh, Dorothy. I picked up a couple of books by this time. And I knew what missing time meant. She did not. I'm like, Dorothy, you may have been inside that thing. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, that's missing time. Haven't you heard of this? She's like, no. There wasn't a lot out there about UFOs at this time. But yeah, I was not a happy camper. I was really upset. This was not good news as far as I was concerned.
Well, let's hit on that for a second, if you don't mind. I guess your perspective at the time, what, if we could a little more express to us, what was your perception? Why did that, I guess, bother you? What was your view on all of this as a whole at that time?
Because I thought I had a pretty good handle on the world. I thought that, finding out UFOs were real was a big pill to swallow. And that there was a government cover-up. And our own government was, using our tax dollars to lie to us. Not only that, make UFO witnesses look like idiots and fools and drug users and liars. And I just could not believe it. And yet I had no choice but to believe it. So my whole belief system just kind of collapsed, and it was painful. I didn't like it. It was, don't get me wrong, it's fascinating stuff. I was riveted by these stories. But it was never mentioned in school. It was not taken seriously on TV at all. It was all very jokey. And if you see a UFO, you're, an idiot. You're a liar. You're misperceiving. And that just wasn't true. And the more I dug into it, I'm like, wow, a lot of really credible people have seen this stuff. It was just unbelievable to me. I ended up buying all the books I could find. That wasn't enough. It was hearing stories wasn't enough. I started investigating firsthand. I joined MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, became a field investigator.
So this was prior to you writing any kind of book or anything. You just decided, well, let me see what I can do, and got involved.
Yeah, I started going
Okay.
to UFO conventions, local UFO meetings, started going outside at night, camping, and where people said, I saw one the other day. I'd be like, where do you live? I'm coming over. I wanted to see. I mean, I really wanted to see this, and I eventually did. But yeah, I was in this field for about 10 years doing lots of just field work and researching and investigating and interviewing before I'd written like 30, 40 articles before I wrote my first book.
Okay.
So yeah,
So
long time.
in that process, then when you joined MUFON, where you were out in the field, I'm assuming, so you were starting to get even more of these firsthand encounters, their stories at least. You're no longer just read. I think there's some sort of a separation when we read a story, when we read something on the internet. There's this weird I don't want to use the term too much, but the cognitive dissonance where it's like, oh, that's there. Or back in the day it was a newspaper, whatever. But when you're sitting down with somebody and you're looking them eye to eye and you're feeling the emotions of this, and people, I think we still forget, guys, just how connected we are right now versus what we were in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't that long ago that things could be happening in the next hour and you just didn't even know. We're just so connected now with everything. But for you, what was that experience like to sit down in front of an individual and hear it firsthand versus reading on a piece of paper?
Yeah, this was before the internet. This was before you could just look up anything online. I went to MUFON and became a field investigator. They gave me a test. It was hard. It was a take-home test. I thought, well, it's a take-home test. This is going to be easy. Nope. You could not look up anything online. You had to go to the library. It was all about photography and astronomy and weather. And so, yeah, sitting down in front of a person was as close as I could get at this point to the phenomena. And it changes you, especially if you know this person well. And, I started getting referrals from, family and friends of their friends, and people at work would come in and they would introduce me. Here's Preston. If you've seen a UFO, he wants to hear about it. I'm like, thanks. I have to tell you that I've talked to a lot of people, and often this is what they will say. They'll get a little teary-eyed even. And they're like, I haven't told my wife this. I haven't told my husband this. I've not told anybody what I'm about to tell you. I've had people cry as they're telling their story, or shake, or get really nervous. And like, I don't know if I should tell you this. You're not going to believe me. I'm like, trust me, I'm looking into this. I'm interested. I want to know what you experienced. And yeah, people will weep as they're telling their story. You just know it's real because they're shaking with emotion. They're not all crying. Some are like super excited. They're jumping up and down, like, oh man, you wouldn't believe it. Can't believe it. You're actually going to listen to me. No one believes me when I tell them this.
Yeah,
it was amazing. I'll never forget those days in the beginning of like just listening to people spill out their story.
Was there one that stuck out to you, I guess, in the beginning, one that kind of really hit home for you, or it started to click, or maybe it was a couple of them collectively that drove something home, kind of put the nail in the coffin, as it were, for you?
Yeah, I think the real nail in the coffin came from my sister-in-law.
With her missing time?
No, this is another one.
Oh, another one, even better. Let's go.
Yeah, she told me she had seen a UFO with her friends. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Wow. And I ended up interviewing her and her friends about this sighting. And it was a good several months, maybe a year later, I'm talking to her and she's like, well, I saw something else once. I'm like, what did you see? She says, well, I was walking outside my home in Van Nuys and taking a walk at night. It's around 11 p.m. with her dog, Sarah. And she saw what she thought were two kids standing in front of Stagg Street Elementary School.
Okay.
And she's walking closer to them. They're standing under the spotlight there. It became really apparent to her that they looked strange. They were, about under 5 feet tall. So she's like, kids, could they be wearing masks? Because it looked like almost they were wearing masks. Their skin was so white. They were bald. She thought, well, it's not Halloween. It's not anywhere near Halloween. It was summer. And she walks up right next to them because they're, she's on the sidewalk and they're right there in the courtyard. So she's about 10 feet away from them as she's passing by them. And she's looking at them and they aren't human. She says, they were not human. Like, what do you mean? She said, I don't know what they were. She did not use the term aliens. She did not know what to think. But she described them as wearing olive green jumpsuits with little kind of mandarin collars. She said they had huge, huge heads, very pale white, so white that, if it was a human, they would have been dead. That's how she described it.
Wow.
Giant dark eyes, almost no nose or mouth that she could see. And they were looked like they were floating about an inch above the ground. And she says, as she walked right up next to them, they were face to face, almost like they were kissing, but they weren't. She says, that was weird. And as she's right up next to them, they swiveled and turned and looked at her and locked gazes with her. So it scared the daylights out of her. It was like being woken up when you're already awake. They weren't human.
Yeah.
And she just didn't want to run because she didn't want to feel like she was in a complete panic. So she just started walking as fast as she could and not looking back. And I'm like, what do you think they were? She says, I don't know. I never thought about it. I didn't want to think about it. It scares me. I'm like, did they say anything? No, didn't say anything. I'm like, Suzanne, that sounds like gray aliens. She's like, what are they? What's a gray alien? And she had just, as she was describing it, I'm like, ooh, if she tells me they have big dark eyes and a big head, I was starting to predict what she was going to say. So I'm like getting chills as she's describing it because I knew what she was going to tell me. And she had never read a UFO book in her life. Had no real interest in the subject. And still does not like to talk about it.
Yeah.
But she saw one aliens close up. That blew my mind.
It's funny when you hit on that too, because like Anthony brought up a minute ago, it's amazing how he was saying that when we tell people, because you had a moment there, right? When you were listening to her, like he was saying, here it is. Never understand how people can tell others that you didn't see what you saw or experience what you experienced. And in that moment, you could have, right? The rational, easy out, to be fair, would have been like, well, good for you. Maybe were you drinking? Like there's always the classic go-tos. But I do appreciate that you took time. Was it kind of hard for you to be more open? Do you minded on it, or do you think it would have been easier to kind of tell her that what she's seen wasn't what she's seen?
At that point, I was absolutely I don't want to use the word okay with it, but because it was hard to hear, kind of in a way, because that's it. There goes my belief system. I am done. I'm cooked. Aliens are real. She's an artist. She, when we're watching a movie, we're all like, what just happened? And she's got an almost eidetic memory. She can remember things like nobody's business. And hearing her describe that, it's funny because people will try to like, what were you smoking? Or, here's what you saw, just so you know. I'm like, oh, you were there, huh? No, they weren't.
Yeah. I had somebody not long ago, well, I guess it was last year, they were listening to a story that I had covered, and it happened to be a family member of theirs. And they came to me afterwards and they said, I just want you to know that story they told, they're lying. And I was letting them at first kind of say their piece, but they kept going at it. They're really lying to you. They lied to you. And I said, well, here's the deal. I said, first of all, I always give everybody free reign within reason of you are free to share whatever you want to our listeners here in the group. It's not my job to be a damper of some sort to filter what's coming through within, general good reason there. In the chat, that's their job. They listen. I'm not going to, if somebody wants to come on and lie to us, that's their business, right? But for you to sit there and say, not being there, you know, how can you sit there and really say that? You know, and to be fair, it's it could go either way here. And well, it's different. What I'm saying is more realistic and in reality that we live in. Well, maybe that's just the reality that we are choosing to live in right now. Who knows? But I agree with what you're saying, that too many people seem to reach out to that whole point of, well, this is what it was. Let me tell you what you experienced. And that has to be so frustrating for someone who's experienced something that's just unexplainable. How do you deal with that? No wonder some experiences have a lot of, not all, but some have got anger and animosity that way, is because look what happens. They come forward, they're labeled as frauds, not only from the outside, but even sometimes within the community. People are like, well, that's not that never happened to me, so that couldn't have happened to you. And I don't know. It just must be a very hard thing to come forward and share such a raw emotional thing that happened to you. This very personal thing that happened to you too, you know?
Yeah, it split my family in two. It really did.
Did it really? Wow.
My dad was not happy. He's like, why are you talking about UFOs? I'm like, Dad, they're real. My brother's like, stop talking about this. You sound like an idiot. I'm like, I'm sorry, you're the idiot. If you won't even look at the evidence, look at the evidence. Skeptics will not look. They just won't even examine the evidence. It's infuriating. And what I found real quick is that almost all the people I was interviewing who had seen UFOs had witnesses with them. I feel so
really
bad for people who see this stuff alone and have no one to because you question I've had a few sightings by myself, and you question your own sanity. Your first go-to is like, did I just imagine that? Oh my God, did that just really happen? And when you have someone there with you, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to absorb something that's just beyond your, experience.
So from this, I guess, at this point, you're starting to collect, it sounds like you went almost a decade, give or take, right? 96 before you wrote anything or published any sort of a book. You had to have encountered and accumulated some pretty fascinating stories at this time. And you have to forgive me. I did have the list up earlier. Please forgive me. What was your first book? I forget what the name of the first one was. Do you?
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Okay. I apologize. I should have had that pulled up right there for you.
Yeah. It was my sister-in-law, who married my brother Mark, who saw UFOs, and she had face-to-face encounters as well as a kid, which I haven't talked about yet. She took a while to reveal as well. She's like, you should think about writing a book, Preston. You got some good information. And I was just in the middle of investigating this major UFO wave. And I was writing a book about all the people I'd interviewed. But then I ran into this lady, I'll call her Wendy, who told me that she had been healed by ETs. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, honest to God, I had this cyst. It was causing me all kinds of problems. They diagnosed it with an MRI. I was about to have surgery. That night, the ETs came and went to the doctor that day to have surgery, and they couldn't find the cyst. And they accused her of having surgery because not only was the cyst gone, they're like, there's fluid here in your fallopian tube, which is only present if you've had surgery. And what are these laser scars on your stomach? You had surgery. We know you did. And she's like denying it. It's like, no, I didn't. She didn't want to say. I'm like, Wendy, why didn't you tell them the truth? It's like, are you kidding? The men in white coats would have come. I'm like, well, maybe you're right. Because I have known people who did tell and got put into a mental institution. No kidding. By their family. So Wendy tells me this story. I'm like, a healing case. Wow, this is amazing. And I started remembering other cases, like of a police officer who had healed in Texas when a beam of light came down and shined on his hand, healed him of a wound. His baby pet alligator had bitten his finger.
Pet alligator.
Yeah.
That's such a unique thing that it chose to heal then, huh?
Yeah, bizarre. And I knew of another case in France where a guy had been struck by a beam of light and it healed him of an axe wound on his foot and partial paralysis, which he had suffered from years from a war injury. It was a well-authenticated case. I knew of another where a Peruvian customs official had been struck by a beam of light and it cured him of nearsightedness and rheumatism. So Wendy's telling me all this, and all these other cases are running through my head. I'm like, this would make a great article, because I hadn't heard a lot about it. And so I started going through all my books, and I had a lot by then. I have even more now, like 300. But I found like 30 cases. I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to write fit this into an article. This would make a great book.
Yeah.
And it became my first book. Yeah, 100 cases, UFO healings.
Well, let's hit on that for a second. Let's hit on this idea of the healing entity, because there's balance in everything, and we get cases where it's very dark and people had not a good experience. We have a lot of people who have great experiences, but one running theme that you've at least in your opinion, I don't want to speak too much for you, but you have stated before and come out with, as Josh Casey here is pointing out, is that when it comes to healing stuff, like what happened with Chris Bledsoe and his Crohn's disease, you feel, if I'm understanding you correctly, with some of your writing and some of the other things I've heard you talk on before, that the healing seems to be a major proponent of this abduction or contact. So would you care to, I guess, expound upon that a little more?
Oh, I would love to, because I came into this field. I'm like, what? People are being kidnapped by aliens. They're being abducted against their will, stripped of their clothes, laid out on a cold table, and poked at and experimented on by bug-like aliens. This is bad. This is a bad thing for humanity. No bones about it. And I still have some trouble rationalizing the whole abduction phenomena. But then I started to take a step back and really look at it, like what actually happens to people when they are taken on board. And I don't find really any cases at all of what I would call deliberate sadistic behavior on the part of the ETs, or torture, or like wanting to hurt you or scare you, or I'm going to hurt. No, they don't do that. Not at all. In fact, the first words almost always, as a rule, is don't be afraid. Have no fear. We won't hurt you. We're not here to harm you. Do not be afraid. Over and over and over and over again, they say that. I'm like, huh. And people are pulled on board, and it can be very scary, and often is. And people will have nightmares and PTSD. And some people just have a very strong fear reaction. And when you do, I can see why you might think this is not good for you, especially if they pull out a needle and they're like, nobody likes it. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm starting to get a lot of healing cases. That's good.
Yeah.
That's not bad at all. And in fact, all major researchers, pretty much without exception, have healing cases. Even the ones who's like, this is bad. David Jacobs takes a pretty dim view. He's a major researcher. But he's got a bunch of healing cases. So does Bud Hopkins and John Mack and Edith Fiore and Barbara Lamb and all of them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this sounds benevolent to me. And then what's this? That exam is the most common thing that happens. So I'm like, okay, what's the second most common? Second most common is being given messages. And these are profoundly positive, in a way at least. They are warning people. Over and over again, they're saying, you guys are awfully warlike. Why are you fighting these wars? You're going to destroy your planet if you don't. Here's a direct quote from one lady. The aliens told her, if you don't stop putting out the greed and negativity, you're going to destroy your planet like we did. And these are the kind of messages they're giving people.
That's a profound message to get right there, right?
Yeah, they're saying, warning against nuclear proliferation, warning against pollution, warning against environmental destruction. These are positive things. And if someone doesn't have a strong fear reaction, and this often happens to people where they've had enough contact or they just get over the fear, then they are treated differently. They're not paralyzed. They do not have their memories suppressed. They have full conscious contact. They're given freedom of movement. And the ETs will be like, would you like to see the engine room?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would like to go back there.
Exactly. And this is not uncommon. I mean, it really isn't. I run across it regularly. And they go down in the engine room and they're like, this is how we do it. It's electromagnetism. We ride the magnetic sheets of your planet. They take them up to the control room, the helm. Like, this is how we fly. Here's the little joystick. Or actually, we do it mentally. Would you like to try? Sit in the seat. Not unusual. Not at all unusual. And people are, get spiritual messages too. There's a very strong spiritual component to all this that's largely overlooked by the nuts and bolts crowd.
Yes.
So yeah, I started to sort of change my mind about all this. I'm like, I'm not going to say they're all our space brothers, because they're not.
Yeah.
And some people do have negative contact, and they are perceiving it as absolutely not good for them, and I have to respect that. But the people who get over their fear, and I see this over and over and over and over again, most people, I would say, do not feel that this is evil. They really don't. And many of the people that I've talked to, especially the ones who are having full conscious contact, not recalling it through hypnosis, say, feel like it's their friends, their family. They are really excited about it.
Well, let's do this for a minute, because what I'd love to do is, first of all, welcome many that have come in here tonight. We got a busy one in the chat tonight. So if anybody have missed you, Rainey Cruz, welcome. Tammy, I didn't get to give you a shout out earlier. Lois, thank you for being in here tonight. Anyone else I missed? Tim F, thank you guys so much. If you guys have any questions, please put them in caps if you can. I was trying to get a good base here with Preston before we start bringing on a lot of the questions for you guys, but feel free to start sending them, and I'll try to keep track of those as well. Also, really quick too, I just want to let everybody know, in case you end up taking off tonight, Lynn Wallington going on at 12 a.m. Eastern time zone here. She will have oh my goodness, why am I drawing a blank right now? Samantha Mowat. Oh my goodness, I think I said it right. Samantha Mowat. She's on there with her tonight. Speaking of someone who's had a lot of interesting experiences in contact, every time I learn something new from her. So make sure you support SOR, as they're always giving us shout outs. And Dave Scott, obviously, will be on Monday through Friday. And Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal, welcome to the chat tonight. Preston, what I'd love to do is, because you have some really interesting stories that you've, even in your last book, you've always had, first of all, every one of your books have had some amazing stories in them, right? But is there any that have really stuck out to you that, if you don't mind my asking, there's one in particular I just got to ask about, because it's just, you just don't hear it every day, right? Which is the mantis being that the lady saw when she was out with her. I believe was she jogging with her dog, I believe, at the time?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a couple of these stories that you're okay with. And I know we'll start getting some questions rolling in a minute here. But yeah, that one in particular really struck me and stuck with me. Besides, there's got one other one I'd love to bring up later. But yeah, what happened with this lady who went out for the jog with her puppy there?
Yeah, really neat lady. I call her Eleanor. She didn't want her real name used. She's a teacher.
Okay.
And she goes jogging early every morning at 4:30 a.m. I don't know how she does it, but she enjoys it. And went out jogging outside of her home in O'Fallon, Illinois. This is 1996. O'Fallon, Illinois. This is a tiny, I'm going to say a rural sort of area. And she goes down her street, down another street, is jogging up this third street, which leads to a little street called Kyle Road. I found the exact location. I looked it up, of course. And her dog is right by her side, and suddenly the dog stops and looks ahead, and that caught her attention. She's thinking, a fox, a deer, or maybe it's a raccoon, which happened often enough. And instead, she saw what looked like a man on stilts walking down the center of Kyle Road, a man on stilts with extenders on his arms, which made zero sense. It's 4:30 a.m. This is a fairly busy road during the day, by the way, but not at this hour. And so she stops and watches this thing, and it's taking big, long strides, and it's nimble. I mean, it can walk fast, and walks right under the streetlight. And she gets a really good view at it in full, artificial light. And it's a praying mantis. And she says it's 15 feet tall. And she knows this. I know, that's crazy. She knows it because it was right up against the streetlight, and she could measure it. And that's the reason she contacted me, because I do have another case of a 15-foot tall praying mantis. And she couldn't find any other case that matched hers except one in one of my other books. I've gotten a lot of praying mantis cases, but only two involving a 15-foot tall guy. And she said it was taking about 6 to 10-foot strides. It had a mottled gray body with really long stick-like limbs, a triangular head like a praying mantis, eyes the size of basketballs, and did not seem to see her because its head was pointed down, and it's scanning the road back and forth, as if it had dropped something and was looking for it. And it, she had it in view for only a few moments. She's about 150 feet away, maybe. Could be a little closer, a little farther. And it walks along the road and starts to disappear into the darkness. And she doesn't turn around and run home like I think I might have. I don't know.
I would have ran for sure.
She runs after it. She runs after this thing.
Good for her. Honestly, good for her. That was all the adrenaline from all that running. See, the runners are prepared for life. They're ready to take on anything at any time.
Yeah. So she watches, she gets up to the T intersection there and sees it off disappearing in the darkness. And I believe it turned off into the cornfield. She runs up and looks for it, and she can't see it anymore. It's gone. I'm like, wow, did you go jogging the next day? And she's like, of course I did. I didn't see it again. I'm like, is there anything in this area that would attract something like this? So I don't know. I was jogging by the high school. There's cornfields. It's a rural area. There's not much there but houses and fields. But there is one thing, she said. And she says, I live about 6 miles away from Scott Air Force Base.
It's always those Air Force bases, I'm telling you what.
It is. And when she said that, I'm like, ooh, Scott. Because I instantly thought of the case that had occurred 4 years later, year 2000. A group of police officers all across Illinois saw this giant UFO just tracking across the state right over. It skirted around Scott Air Force Base, right where she was. Exactly. I don't know if there's...
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, Jim was asking a question really quick too about in relation to the story. Did it ever notice her at any point?
She doesn't think so. I wonder about that. No, it didn't notice her. But I started
weird,
and I'm thinking, gosh, is this a one-off? You know what I mean? Like, is this the only experience she ever had? Because usually when someone sees something that close, they are a contactee,
right?
And
but she didn't want her name out there, right? She didn't. Just wasn't some sort of fame reach or anything.
No, she told only her family, and the only reason she told me because she wanted me to know that someone else had seen what I had written about in another case, which involved a Navy medic, by the way. Another really good witness, trained observer.
Yeah, because that was another. Again, that was the only other one that you had, right? That had such a tall encounter with a mantis being.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and it was right by a school, which I found interesting because I did a whole book on schoolyard encounters, because I see this comment here on the aerial school, which was a major schoolyard encounter. That's
what he's asking about. That's what I was going to bring up the next question for you.
I wouldn't classify Eleanor's case as a schoolyard encounter, but I wonder, because I've got 100 schoolyard encounters, and the aerial school is one of them. And this documentary by Randall Nichols, I've been waiting. There's been trouble behind the scenes. That's all I know. There was trouble with funding. I don't know. Something's going on, but I feel like it's getting close because some of the witnesses are really beginning to go public. He's been going more and more on the radio and podcasts talking about it. I want to see that so bad. It's such an amazing case.
So let's just say in this one, did you have it? I mean, that kind of the update where we're at right now, I guess, for the April School documentary, I guess, correct? We're essentially just any day, right? Is the hope at this point? Yeah,
because it was supposed to come out well over a year or two ago, and it didn't. And then he just kind of dropped off the radar, and everyone's like freaking out because this is probably one of the most famous cases, certainly in the world.
Well, let's hit on this. What's that? Oh, Zero Cool?
Yeah, I think that he's right. That was exactly what I thought.
The Air Force Base. I know. As soon as I seen that, I was
Honestly, I'm like, huh? Because they are neck deep in this stuff. They are holding captured UFOs, alien bodies. The Air Force knows a lot more than they're saying.
mm-hmm.
And many of these Air Force bases have been directly, uh, involved with these encounters. I mean, they are implicated. That was the word I'm looking for. Implicated with this phenomena. And Scott Air Force Base is one of many. I wonder about that for sure. Another thing that's weird about Eleanor's case with the 15-foot tall praying mantis is that was like a month or less after the Chicago O'Hare airport sighting.
Love that one too. I love stuff that has the documentation because people always want to argue about it and say, well, where's the evidence? Well, when you have both footage, you have the aerial or tracking that's going on, you have the firsthand encounters, and then you have those that come through and kind of hush the situation back down. What more do we need? At a certain point, you have to ask, what is it going to take? At a certain point, I get that you're just wanting them on the front lawn of the White House, but that's just not, I mean, I don't, maybe it will, but I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but I don't.
Hey, it almost did. In 1954, they did fly over.
True, very true.
If we had not shot at them and scrambled jets, I bet they would have. I don't know, but they are showing themselves. Look at the Phoenix
100%.
Lights.
Yep.
Look at Hudson Valley. Look at Gulf Breeze. Look at a huge wave over Wytheville, Virginia, Mexico City, Belgium. I could go on. France had a huge wave in 1950s. Topanga Canyon. I wrote a book. That was one of my books. The Topanga Canyon wave of 1992 to 94.
So true. It's funny let's hit on that for a second though, because and again, like I mentioned, listen, complete novice here with so much of this stuff. There's so much to learn. And it's one of the things that I love about this is that I recognize that there'll never be a point where I don't feel like a novice. Right. And I kind of like that. I'm enjoying this journey. So, but with the school, obviously you heard of the Zimbabwe incident, you have the incident over in Australia, and those were the two big ones I had heard of. I didn't realize until I came across you that there were so many other school encounters. So, I mean, is there another one besides the two that we know of that really has stuck out besides the two that they have been talked about to you?
Yeah, well, I have to say, I didn't know it either. And I've been in this field for 35 years, and that's a pretty new book. So I was like 30 years, had no idea that this was a thing. And I knew about the Zimbabwe case after it occurred, 1996. And for those who don't know, that was such an amazing case. 200 kids on the playground. It's 11 a.m. and UFO lands next to the playground. Aliens come out and talk to some of the students. It's an amazing case. And I thought, wow, that is cool. And then I heard about the Westall case, of course, which is Australia's most famous case. 300 students and teachers too. And a UFO lands next to the playground again. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. That reminds me of the Broadhaven case in Wales, also really famous, where a UFO landed next to the playground. School officials saw it, though it took them a while to come out and admit it.
Always does.
And the kids saw it too. I'm like, huh. And I did a little search on it. I'm like, oh, the Crestview Elementary School case in Opelika, Florida. 200 kids and teachers saw it. Lands next to the school. I'm like, wow, I wonder if this is a thing. My sister-in-law saw two aliens right in front of Stagg Street Elementary School. And I had another guy who was abducted from the playground at school. I'm like, let's look into this. This could be a thing. And it was. Boy, was I shocked. I mean, I could not believe what I found. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe there's a few cases. No, over 100. Found them across Canada, all across the US, Mexico, Brazil, Peru, all across South America. It's the Zimbabwe case is one of several in Africa, all across Europe. England had a bunch of them. China, Australia, of course. New Zealand had a case with 400 students and teachers. And this UFO hovered for 15 minutes right over the school. This is
Yeah.
absolutely something they are doing on purpose. These are not normal sightings.
A question here for you, by the way. Greetings from Portugal. Question: does Preston know of any case in Portugal?
Oh, I bet if I looked it up, the one
There's
that comes to mind is one of the most, probably the most widely viewed event in the world ever, which would be the Fatima sightings of 1917, 1918. I think it's 17,
okay.
which is, been cataloged as a religious miracle by a lot of people. But there's been a lot of UFO researchers looking into it. And they're like, well, people were describing a metallic disc and it was giving off heat and it was sending down little bits of material, which we now know is angel hair. And
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of it. What is angel hair? Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I did a whole study of it in one of my books because it's fascinating. There's lots of physical evidence. People don't realize, photographs is one thing. Moving films and eyewitness testimony is all good. Landing traces, there's a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And government documents, animal effect cases, electromagnetic effect cases, medical evidence can make or break a case. It's really good evidence. But then there's angel hair. And there are about 50 to 100 well-documented cases. I'm sure you could times it by 10 if you were to really dig in. And I did dig in and I found about 40. So it's not common. It just isn't very common. But in case after case after case, all across the world, stretching back to the 1950s onward to the present day, there are cases where UFOs emit this substance that's very wispy, like spider webs, like cotton candy, that sort of like silly string type of thing. It often melts or dissolves upon contact. And there are some really famous cases like Jerome High School in Marysville, Ohio. This happens to be a schoolyard encounter where some 60 kids were on the playground and these UFOs are flying around. It's daytime and these UFOs emit a ton of angel hair. When I say a ton, almost literally, because it coated the school playground inches deep and actually about 3 miles around the school itself. The UFOs were putting on a display for the school and emitted this, whether on purpose or not, I don't know.
Right.
But they gathered up bits of it. They actually sent off a sample to Lockbourne Air Force Base, who declined to comment, took it, but never said anything.
Of course.
Found out later the government was very interested, and this was one case they could never figure out. There was some Pentagon guy, Major White at the Pentagon, came forward and said, yeah, this was the case that really stumped his office. It's a great case.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, angel hair. And scientists have been able to gather samples of it and study it. And it's weird. It's got boron in it.
Really?
Which is not, super. Where is that coming from?
Right.
And boron is something we actually use for shielding nuclear materials, by the way. So that's weird. And there's other metals in it. Chromium, I'd have to look it up. But magnesium, I believe, was one. There's actual, kind of rare metals. Ones that should not be there. There's another case, real brief, which occurred 1 year later, almost exactly, at Whitsitt Elementary School in North Carolina. Again, it coated the playground. And they were able to gather samples, sent it off to Burlington Labs. And they said, we don't know what it is. It might be spider webs. We don't think so. You should send it off to a biologist. They might be able to tell. And they did. And the biologist said, nope, this is not spider webs. It's funny. One kid actually reached down and put it in his mouth before the teacher could stop him.
Oh, no. That's what someone said earlier. They're like, oh, it's just, Champ Bailey. He was like, it's just cotton candy, angel hair.
No, I'm going to recommend not eating it.
Do not eat it.
The kid did not like it. He said it tasted salty.
Oh, no.
Made a bad face. It wasn't cotton candy.
Oh, man. So to Josh has a question again. Thank you, Josh. He says, "Does Preston think they are trying to put downloads in young school children? Their brains are like sponges. They all seem to be beneficial to planet and species." Thank you for that question, by the way.
Yeah, I think in some cases, for sure, absolutely 100%, maybe not all. Certainly in the Rua Zimbabwe case, they talked to the kids directly and said, stop chopping down the forests. If you do, lots of people will die. Your air is way too polluted, they told Emily Trim. You are becoming way too technological. There's a good way to use technology and a bad, and you could do much better. I'm like, these are elementary age students. What do they know about environmentalism or technology? 1990. Yeah, I think they put that message in them. And that comes up in a few cases. One lady I interviewed personally, she got a message. They said, remember this day in English. I think mostly it's just a sort of, hello, hi, we're here.
Yeah.
UFOs are real. You will, and now you know, type of thing. But some of these kids grow up and they're like scientists. They become astrophysicists or quantum physicists or UFO investigators. One guy from Scotland, he had an encounter on the playground with his friends, and he's now one of Scotland's, if not the leading investigator in Scotland. He wrote UFOs over Scotland 1 and 2 and a bunch of other books. Malcolm Robinson. Yeah. And a few others have become UFO researchers and talking about it. And yeah, I think they are giving downloads to kids, but mainly it's just, I think, a very clever way to announce their presence to the world without, causing religion and business and everything to collapse and everyone go running for the hills. They'll just sneakily show themselves to kids, because who listens to kids?
It's true. I mean, I feel kind of bad if you think about it. When a young child has an encounter, who do we go to? We go to our parents, right? And our parents usually end up getting fed up with whatever story's going on, and then it's just this poor kid kind of by themselves on their own. And I mean, I'm not trying to set that up to make the ETs a bad guy or anything here, but like, that's a lot for a young child to deal with. No wonder they kind of repress all of this and just never really talk about it too much,
Yeah, my heart goes out to kids, because often, and this is particularly true for contactees or experiencers or abductees, call them what you want. I'll call them contactees. This field needs some better words, but at any rate,
experiencers, maybe we can use whatever, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good word, but the dictionary doesn't recognize it. My spell check always is saying, what's experiencers?
I know. Every time I put it in, it puts it in red. I'm like, wait, did I get it wrong? Did I type it wrong? Who checked again?
But the point is, these kids are having contact at age 4, 5, and 6, and 7, or 8, young. And they go running into their parents' room like, there's, I'm seeing weird clown-like figures, or, weird trolls, or, gray people, or these guys with big eyes. And the parents often say, oh, you're having a nightmare. Go back to bed. And it's just my heart goes out to these. Yeah, this is a message to all you parents out there.
For real.
Believe your kids. I had one lady who did, because she had this as a child over and over and over again. They called it the Muddy Man. Both she and her sister saw it. Her parents didn't believe it. And finally, her daughter comes into her room one day. This is now years and years later. And her daughter's like, Mommy, I saw a little man in my room. And he touched my arm. And she showed a scar on her arm. And her mom's like, oh my God, she has the same scar, same place.
Her mom does. Okay. Because see, Ben and Joe, by the way, Ben, what's up? I see you in here tonight, brother. Thank you for all the support that you do. And thank you for having this amazing channel where we get the opportunity to talk to gentlemen like Preston Dennett himself. Because this is actually Ben and Joe's channel. They're a great couple of guys. If you ever get a chance, we should definitely get you set up with them again. But they've been hitting on this recently. I believe it was last episode, or maybe it was the episode before, where you have these family lineages where it seems to be following a family, and hitting on the markers, maybe scoop marks on a skull or different scars like you're hitting on. Is that something that is more than just a hypothesis? Do you feel that there's evidence to back this up, almost moving into a theory at this point?
Yeah, yeah. Bud Hopkins was really the first to put this forth in his book Intruder. It's like, oh, this follows families, and because I'm like, yeah, it does, because I was getting cases too, and I think that's been very firmly established that a good portion, I'm going to say about 50 to 60 or 70% of people who are being taken on board, so have their parents or their
Mm.
aunt or their uncle or grandparents. It's following family lineage for sure. We have cases stretching back 3, 4, 5 generations that you know are supported by actual eyewitness testimony. And the ETs have told many of people, "Oh, we've been following you since biblical times." And they showed Jim
Wow.
Sparks. He's a really well-known contactee. They showed him images of him being contacted in Victorian times and Roman times, all the way back to caveman times. It is
Wow.
absolutely following families, but that's not the only pattern, because I've talked to people who have a
Okay.
one-off all the time. I'm like, oh, so have you ever, one lady, here's a good example, and how I kind of figured out a really interesting pattern of contact. Because I kept thinking, why are some people having contact and others not? I was looking at my files. It's evenly divided between men and women. It's all different races. I've talked to pretty
Mm.
much every different race out there, and they all see and have contact. And it's not age, it's not religion, it's not political affiliation, it's not blood type. There's all this talk about Rh negative. I'm like, no, I know people who are different blood types who are having contact. I started asking, what's your blood type? Rh negative does turn up. But then I interviewed this one lady in Norway, and she contacted me because I was doing research on healings, and she had a healing experience.
Hmm.
And where Grays came into her room, scared the living daylights out of her. She's screaming at them, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And they just didn't say a word. Flipped her around like a rag doll, put her on her stomach, pressed this instrument against her back, and walked out through the wall and took off. And she ran to the window, and they were gone. And she says, "They healed my back." I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah, I had a chronic back injury and could barely work." I'm like, "Well, what do you do for a living?" She says, "Well, I used to be an artist, a graphics artist. It's
Okay.
really affecting my job." I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." I've talked to a number of artists who've had contact. And then she said something which sent chills down my spine. She says, "Please don't use my name, because actually my true passion is human rights and animal rights. I'm an animal rights activist in my country. I'm fairly well known, and this could affect my work if this comes out. So please don't use my name." And I said, I won't. But I'm like, wow, this is like the 5th social worker I've interviewed who has been healed. This happened to John Hunter Gray. Michael Carter,
Mm.
healed of a blood clot in his leg. He works really hard against racism, was commended by President Clinton. I just kept, and I'm like, let's look at the jobs of people who are having contact. And I'm like, wow, there are a lot of doctors, a lot of teachers, a lot of musicians, a lot of police
Interesting.
officers, inventors, social workers, environmentalists, you know, animal rights activists, people who are doing good work for humanity in some capacity are the ones who are much more prone to have contact than your average person. That's not always true, but it turns up enough where I'm like, huh. And
There's a
when she,
pattern, like you're saying, though, that
yeah,
pattern keeps repeating. You have to at least, and that's another interesting thing. This is what I love that you've done too, by the way. And honestly, guys, I'm not doing enough credit here to credit all the hard work that Preston's put in over the years, because it's been decades of work that you've put in, and you've put things in a great chronological order that we can go back to and reference. Like some would reference, Jim Goodall and other ones that have documented certain specific areas within this community or the subject, and they've done so much of the legwork for us. So for you to be able to kind of start making some of these correlations where people just look at it initially, and let's be honest, it can be a bit chaotic. It's like looking at chaos theory. It's like, what's going on here? We have these one-offs, we have these following, but doing the work that you've done, it's really amazing to kind of see how there seems to be somewhat of a pattern. Now, that's not to say that we've got any idea what's really going on, but there seems to be some correlation to at least the family. If you've had an experience, like you said, it might be someone else in the family. Now, to hit on what you're saying, as far as those that are trying to make a difference in humanity, that now being something that's coming to play, that's a new one. I had not really heard of that one too much yet. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, I was really encouraged by it. And I did find other
That is
patterns.
encouraging. Really? Okay. Yeah. Let's keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, this really freaked me out. I started looking, 'cause when I found out like schools are attracting UFOs. And I mean, this is well documented, Air Force bases and technological installations really of any kind. Jim and Cora Lorenzen are pioneering researchers, and they noticed a pattern right off the bat that whenever there was a new factory being built or anything technological, UFOs would show up. And I'm like, wow. So I started looking into this, and I found, this is so weird. This is so weird. Prisons.
Okay.
I found like 50 cases of UFOs
Really?
hovering over prisons, low level, seriously low level, and widely viewed by not only guards, but the prison population. Photographed, physiological effect cases, a lot of them. There's a lot of these weird. Here's another one that just freaked me out. Graveyards.
Really?
Yeah. You think of graveyards as, ghosts, right?
Yeah.
But Jim and Cora Lorenzen had a few cases where UFOs were hovering over graveyards and funeral homes. And then so did J. Allen Hynek, who's huge in this field. Had a case where a UFO was hovering over a graveyard. This couple is driving by, and they're like, "What's that over the graveyard?" And the guy lifts his hand to sort of wave at the UFO, and it pins him to the car roof, and he's paralyzed. And the car goes out,
Oh my God.
and the UFO takes off. It was doing something they did not want them to see because there was all this weird fog over. And Raymond Fowler had like 3 cases. Ray Fowler's, of course, Betty Andreasson fame and the Allagash abductions. So I started looking into it, and I found a bunch of cases. I actually wrote an article for Fate magazine about UFOs in cemeteries, and they didn't publish it. I'm like, that's weird, 'cause they've been publishing all my stuff. I've been getting the cover. And then I saw the next issue, and it turned out another researcher, Scott Corelli's, had beat me to the punch, because there was this case that had just been publicized in West Virginia where UFOs were hovering over Nethkin Cemetery and Dean Memorial Cemetery. And it was coming so often, people were actually able to predict. And they published his article.
Wow.
But they're landing. There's humanoids being seen. They're affecting the graves. They are actually, I don't want to say grave robbing, but that's what it looks like.
Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. I was to say, go ahead. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what it looks like in some of these cases. Because they're physically affecting the graves. These are well documented cases. There's a lot of them. And that's just one of many like UFO attractors. Rocket launches for sure. Prisons. I'd have to think about it for a second, but there's a bunch of them.
Well, while you're thinking about that, another question here for you. Does Preston think that witnesses' anonymity has damaged the credibility of the UFO field in the eye of the general public?
Well, yes and no. In one way, yes, because people are like, well, who are you talking about? It could be anybody. How do we even know this person is real? Blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, people are like, well, this person is clearly not seeking fame or fortune. And the fact that they want to remain anonymous in some ways strengthens their credibility. I have to tell you, I always ask people, can I use your real name? And back in the day, they're like, please no, don't, please no.
Yeah.
But now many people are fine with it. I would say most. So
yeah,
it's a tricky question. I always think, personally, I think if you are willing to let your name be used, it increases the credibility of the case. Because if you're willing to stand by your account, I don't even want to see photographs from anonymous sources, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't. It's just too easy to CGI and fake this stuff. But a person is willing to stand behind their photograph and to explain what happened. I'm much more willing to at least take a look at it.
Yeah. Interesting point here, and I don't know if this is true or not, but Tammy Finnegan, first of all, we love you so much. Thank you for always being here and supporting the chat. She said calcium is needed to make element 115. Just saying. Now, I don't know anything about that, but that would be very interesting if that is the case.
Yeah, that's going back to the whole angel hair. There's all these elements in it. It makes you wonder. And that reminds me of the other UFO attractor that I really wanted to talk about because it blew my mind. And it just freaked me out because there was this case here in California where a UFO was hovering over what was it, an iron mine? Titanium mine?
Yes.
And it had kept landing, and the occupant was being seen over and over again, same day each month for 3 months in a row. And I started looking into it, and I found a bunch of cases. There's a case in Karnes City, Texas, where a UFO hovered over a uranium mine, sent down beams of light. Some of the workers were so freaked out they were crying. And when they finally got to the uranium, it had been spent, or it was sucked up. It was gone. And Arizona is the leading producer of copper in the U.S. There's like 20 cases of UFOs hovering over the copper mines there, landing, humanoids are being seen. I mean, it's photographed. I put out a thing on this on my YouTube channel. It's a 2-hour presentation of about 50 cases. I'm telling you, they are absolutely hovering over mines, landing and taking our metals. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, I tell you what, and we're going to take, guys, here in about 12 minutes. We'll take a break here at the bottom of the hour, 10:30. We'll take a quick 5-minute break there. If anybody's going to use the bathroom, including yourself, Preston, or anything, I always like to take a small break there. I forgot to tell you about that before we got started. But before we get, within the next 12 minutes here, I would love to hit on, speaking, which I feel like it kind of goes into what you're talking about here. You had a very interesting case from some people, I believe, who remained anonymous. I could be mistaken on that, where a craft actually came out of the water and hovered over a refinery there and seemed to be taking samples. Do you recall this case at all?
Yes. And no, they weren't anonymous.
Oh, they were not? Okay.
Joy Williams and her husband, Bill.
Okay.
This occurred at Moss Landing. This is such a weird case. I've done a lot of...
It's fascinating.
Oh, it's so weird. I've done a lot of research into USOs. For some reason, I just got dragged into that early on.
I love it. It's so fascinating.
It really is. USOs, unidentified submersible objects, haven't got a lot of attention over the years. And I was getting reports from the beginning off the coast of Southern California, which turned out to be one of the leading producers of USO reports in the world. I got 150 cases. 150. I ended up writing a whole book about this.
This is amazing.
But
this is the only thing. Sorry to interrupt you for just a hot second, but when everybody says, well, where are the cases? Where is it at? This is where this is just my little rant on it. It seems that there are times, from someone who has only been in this for a couple of years, looking from the outside, there were only certain cases that end up in the main spotlight. I'll say it that way. And this is one of the things I love that Ben and Joe do here, is that, and what you've done and been doing for years, is that there's so much more out there, guys. There's so much more than what we have on some of the well-known shows that cover this. Not to say that those are any less important. It's just that there is a lot out there when we really dig into it. But unfortunately, it doesn't always get the attention and the recognition that I believe it deserves, personally.
Yeah, there's a reason for that, by the way. There is a cover-up. There really is. And this field is infiltrated. And I mean that seriously. If you look at the citizen UFO groups, it's shocking. Jim and Cora Lorenzen started APRO. They were infiltrated by the CIA. Look at what happened to what was it? NICAP, National Investigative Committee of Aerial Phenomena. Infiltrated. MUFON has a lot of government officials in it. All this UFO Citizens Group are being watched very closely, and they are infiltrated in some of these shows, and I'm not going to name names, but some of these investigators are absolutely on my naughty list. I know who you are. You're not fooling me for a second.
Calling them out right there. That's it.
Donald Menzel, I will name him, or Phil Klass, the arch debunker.
Hmm.
Like, shut up. You know UFOs are real. You're not fooling anybody.
Yes.
But going back to this case, this USL case you mentioned,
Yes.
is so cool. Joy Williams and her husband Bill went out to a family friend's house. This is in Monterey Bay area, Central California. And their friend's house overlooks the Monterey Bay. It's a beautiful area. It's fairly well populated. They have dinner, and Joy goes out onto the balcony to look out at the water, which is about a quarter mile away. She's a military brat. She knows her aircraft, and she sees something coming out of the water. It's this bright yellow glow, and then suddenly this giant sort of oval-shaped craft, glowing bright yellow, comes out. And she can see little portholes. She can see the seaweed coming off of it. And it rises up about 20 feet, 50 feet above the water. She calls out her husband and their house, their host.
Okay.
And they watch this thing go along the coastline towards the Moss Landing coal power plant. They have a telescope on their balcony, so they can see it really close. They can see little, what look like windows, could be lights, they're not sure. It goes directly to the power plant, which has 2 towering smokestacks, like 200 feet high. And this darn object goes right to the tip of one of the smokestacks and stops. And this arm comes out of the side of the craft. So weird. I don't know a case like this. I honestly really do not. There's a few that are close to it, but this metallic-looking arm comes out and has a big claw on the end, a big pincers, and it comes over the craft itself. So, I mean, this is a massive arm. The craft, they're estimating, just looking at the smokestacks, had to be 50 feet across. So this arm itself is, 20 feet long. The pincers alone had to be 10 feet. And it starts digging into the top of the smokestack.
So the stack, like actually going into it, or just what's being emitted, like from the outside, or is it actually going down and in?
Right at the tip. And it wasn't like digging deep, but it was like scraping the sides of the inside of it. And my thought is thinking, well, they're concerned about pollution. They're measuring what's coming out of here is what I'm thinking. And they're taking actual samples. One guy joked, he's like, maybe they're barbecuing. I'm like, well, can't rule it out. We don't know.
So like how we smoke our meats with like a nice cherry wood out there or something. They're like, this is that like chemical compound right here, that plastic melting.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. But it was weird. And, there are lots of cases of UFOs. I mean, there's a case at the Morenci copper smelting plant. Same thing. It hovered over the smokestacks and sent down probes. Actually sent probes down. So I think that's what it's doing.
So you're saying a separate case where this happened, where it sent probes into the factory, like orbs or probes, I guess, or would it be?
Yeah, orbs.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just assuming, I guess, that they're probes. I probably shouldn't say that. A glowing orb.
You're okay. I wonder what the fascination is there. I don't know. Do you think, again, is it just chalked up to the idea that, well, this stuff's maybe not the best for our environment? Who knows? I mean, it's all speculative, and that's one of the great things about this subject is that a lot of it is left up to speculation. But I think one thing we can say for sure is that even if you have not listening to this, accepted this yet, wherever you're at, whatever day of the week, whatever year it is, who knows how far in the future someone's listening to this. One thing that's for certain is that they are here. Something is here. And I think to deny that, once you've seen the truth and once you've even had a glimpse of it, that's not, I mean, that has to be a sad choice, because this is an amazing time that we're living in. And I truly believe that.
Yeah. Well, given that they're so concerned about pollution, I think that's what they were doing, honestly. I'm, of course, speculating, but they called the police, by the way.
Did they really?
Yeah. While it was happening, while this thing was there. And they're like, this thing has come up out of the water. The policeman was very nice in the beginning until it became clear they were describing a UFO. And then he was not nice. He became really hostile.
Wonder why they get so hostile like that,
They're like, it's right there. He's like, you're seeing a boat. They're like, it's in the air. They called the radio station, and the radio's like, no, we haven't received any reports. But I did my research, and I found 4 other cases over the Moss Landing power plant.
So same location then.
Yep, before and
Very
after.
interesting.
So they are watching that closely.
So I wouldn't suppose we'd be lucky enough that anybody got a picture of that or anything, right?
Someone did try in one of the
Okay.
cases, yeah, and I couldn't find the photo, unfortunately.
That's okay.
In one of the prison cases, I did find the photo, and I put it up. Yeah,
Barbecue.
over San Quentin prison.
Well, that's wow. So that's a prison right there. That's not even like a hey, you you skipped on your parole. Like that's you're there. I wonder what the fascination. Do you think by any chance that maybe it has something to do with a lot of people that end up prison? A lot, if you're there, most of the time you have a life sentence of some sort. Do you think it has to do with them changing their life around and kind of the energy that they're putting out? Because you can get some people have had positive experiences in prison have come out a totally different person. Do you think that that's part of it, or do you think they're just observing what are these people, what does the species do? You know, we're noticing these camps of people that are being set up. What are I guess your thoughts? I know that's very broad, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I couldn't find any evidence of that like they're trying to help people, because there are a few cases of people abducted out of prison and they put them back in their cell.
No, oh no.
Yes.
Come on, you know that's the worst. Now, listen, if they're terrible people, they should be loose, but come on. Could you imagine getting loose? Like,
one guy I knew, I contacted him, did an interview. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the audio. It just didn't work. But he was put in prison for marijuana. I mean, that's a non-offense, really. I mean, it's legal now in Canada.
Yeah.
And he was taken out of his cell and put back. No. I know. I think the ETs are like, what the heck? No, the Colorado prison was visited 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
I think they're looking at like, what are these electrified fences? What are these walls? Oh my God, why do these people have guns? These towers?
Oh my gosh. The clothing taste is terrible. We either got brown, orange. It's just ridiculous. It's so funny. Really quick then, because we got about 2 minutes where we take a quick break here. We have another question. Avi Loeb wants to survey hotspots, and I believe Catalina is a big candidate. What does Preston make of the Galileo project and its mission? Would Preston collaborate with the Galileo project if asked?
Yes, Catalina is a major hotspot, and I largely put that on the map, so you're welcome. Kidding, but yeah, I've done major research into that area, and I am asked all the time to go on TV about that, the area there. And in fact, there was Josh Gates just did a show on it, and they, sure enough, had 3 major sightings. And yeah, I know about the Galileo project, and I'm so excited. Because finally, I've been saying for years, all we need is a little time, money, and effort. Let's throw some real money at this. And because the government knows, they've thrown all our own tax dollars at it. Mm-hmm. This is the big subject in government, secret government. And they know. They're lying. They know exactly what this is and have known for years, and they're pouring money into it. And
love it. Champ, Pample. I love it. You're not wrong though. This is something that it's clear to anybody who's spent any time seriously investigating it and studying it like you have yourself.
Yeah, the Catalina Island is a great place, and I do support the Avi project. I would love to be a part of it. I'm pulled in a million different directions these days, but it's such important work. This is a place that needs to be surveilled for sure.
Absolutely agreed. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, we're going to take a quick, just maybe 4 or 5 minute break here to use the bathroom. If that's okay, Preston, I'll take you backstage and I'll just turn on some music for everybody for just a minute. And when we get back, I'd like to dig into a rather peculiar case involving some of the pregnancies and stuff. So if you're okay with maybe going into some of that, we'll get into that once we get back here. So Preston, thank you very much as our guest tonight. I'm going to take you backstage here for just a moment. And guys, I will be right back. So if you got to get a drink, whatever you're having tonight, someone said Reese's. You know what? That's enough for me. I'm going to say sus on that. You guys know what that means. Everybody gets to have a drink of whatever you're sipping on tonight. And we will get this set up for you guys behind the scenes. And I will be right back. Alrighty, guys, and we are back. Oh, I'm sorry, Preston. I should have let you know there. I apologize for I just had you pop back on. I was gonna say, I don't know if you can see the comments there or not. Everybody on the right, you should be able to perhaps see that on the right there. Everybody's having a good time tonight. We appreciate it very much. I love that. I love that Sonny over there at the Paranormal Chop Shop. Guys, go check him out. It's like, let's talk crap about Willie while he's gone. That's how you do it. That's what real friends do. That's how
Yeah, I was just checking out the chat.
everybody in here it's always a great time, and everybody's having a really oh yeah, you were in here commenting. Okay, there we go. I was just about to say, I was like, wait, this guy stole your picture. My goodness, I'll figure out how technology works one day, guys. So let's jump right back into this. There's a whole nother side to this contact stuff that gets, let's be honest, it's like there's stages to all of this, right? If you can get someone to accept the idea that, okay, maybe there are some visitations going on, maybe there is some contact, but then there's the next level, which is possible impregnation and whatnot. So do you have any stories in relation to that would kind of support this hypothesis that some have said? And Peppa H, welcome to the chat tonight. But kind of sus of you coming in late like that. So we love giving Peppa. So around here, anytime somebody says sus in the chat, or if you see me doing this, that's because somebody said it and we take a sip of whatever we're drinking for the night. So that's all that's about. Peppa H, we appreciate you coming in. But yeah, let's dig into this part of it that can be a bit much sometimes. I'll be honest. When I first started hearing about it, I was like, this is a lot to take in. I don't know how to process it really.
Yeah, alien babies. Ugh. I cringe when I have to talk to skeptics about this. I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is not going to be easy for them. And this was not a thing when I got into this field. And I had a case. And I'm like, oh no, what am I going to make of this? This is one of the ladies at work. Her daughter had a gray come into her bedroom and said, you need to come with us. And her daughter's like, no, I can't go. I've got a job. I've got a boyfriend. And they're like, you're coming with us. Don't be afraid. And next thing she knows, she's on board a UFO. These are grays. She said, I'm like, what did they look like? She says, I honestly can't tell you. They were very scary looking. They had dark eyes, gray skin. It looked like a leather glove. It was really scary. They said, we're going to cut your arm.
Oh my goodness.
No. She said, no, please, don't. And they did. She showed me the scar like the next day. And it was already healed over. And they said, well, we now need to do an operation on your brain. That sent her over the edge, obviously.
No kidding. I mean,
she ended up passing out and waking up the next morning. That was the first encounter. There were more. She eventually kind of turned around. She says she feels they're religious. They gave her predictions about she would get a raise at work, her boyfriend, things like this. Talked about her life at church, and she did not think that they were evil or anything. But they kept telling her, you won't remember this. And she's like, I will. Oh, yes, I will.
I love it.
And she did. She's very feisty, as is her mom. Anyway, her mom was taken on board and was showing all these babies. Some did not look human, and some were clearly genetically damaged. And the lady was a human-looking lady showing these to her, and they said, these babies need love. Would you hold one of these babies and give it love? And this is now really well known in the UFO community. This is what we would call a baby presentation.
Yep.
And they show people like, this baby is yours. And it's half alien. And I've got case after case of this. This was my first, and it was one of my early cases. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then finally, Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, had just become a bestseller. And he hadn't put out his book Intruders yet, but that came out, and that's kind of solidified. I'm like, oh, thank God. I thought I was going
the only one
mind here. And he's like, no, there's alien, hybrid. It's a hybridization project.
Mm-hmm.
And I've run into it regularly. And there's an amazing case. Every book I put out pretty much about people who are having onboard encounters, there's cases like this. There's a guy in upstate New York who had this happen. He was not happy. They were like, hold this baby, it's yours. Aren't you happy? And he felt both. I mean, felt all this love towards this child, but he was also repulsed. And he was also angry at the ETs for doing this to him. He does not feel like this been good for him, even though he came away from it with profoundly psychic. I mean, this guy gives psychic readings like nobody's business. But the case I really want to talk about real quick is this couple from Canada who I just recently got back in touch with. They're not separate.
Okay.
But they were a young couple who had just moved to Canada. She was from Europe. They're having a lot of red tape, problems with insurance and their new home and the citizenship and starting a career and so forth. And she became pregnant and everything was fine. For about 7.5 months, they're driving over to a friend's house and had missing time. They got lost and they couldn't understand it. They knew the way. It made no sense. And they didn't think UFO. They didn't see anything, but something really peculiar happened. They were all disoriented and so forth. And it was a short time later, they're in their bedroom and there's this huge electrical storm over their house. And lightning is flashing into the backyard in weird ways. I mean, it's going sideways. It was not normal. And they were freaking out. He jumps up and closes the window and they hop back in bed. They're really frightened. And boom, they pass out. That seemed impossible to them because they were, their adrenaline was pumping. And they wake up, it's morning, and they're both groggy. She especially, she's like, I feel like I've had surgery. She sent me her medical records, by the way, pictures, doctor reports.
Oh, so they went to the hospital to know, like, this wasn't just them saying, hey, I think we're pregnant.
No, she was 7.5 months along. So they had blood tests. They had,
wow.
What do you call it? The ultrasound. They had felt the baby kicking. They knew that the baby was in a breech position at this time, and she wakes up. And her midwife is like, here's these exercises you can do. It should encourage the baby to move away from a breech position. And so she was doing these exercises. And she wakes up the next morning. She's like, honey, my stomach. Look at my stomach. Does it look smaller to you? He's like, yeah, it does. She says, I don't think I'm pregnant. He's like, what are you talking about? It's impossible. She says, honey, I don't feel pregnant. And they're like, well, we better go to the doctor. And they had an appointment. So I think it was like 3 days later, they may have moved it up, as I recall, to that day. They were going to have an ultrasound. So they go to the doctor, and the doctor's freaking out, and he's doing more tests, and he's like, I don't know how to tell you guys, you're not pregnant. And they're like, what? He says, you're not pregnant. I don't know how to explain this. It must have been a misdiagnosis. I don't understand it. You are not pregnant. Maybe you never were. Because he could not wrap his head around it. And they knew they were pregnant. I mean, she felt the baby. They both felt the baby kicking. And so they start crying, and they're really upset. And he was more upset than she was. And I asked them, they had to tell their family. They had built a nursery. This is a big deal.
Man.
And their family, oh my God. Because I asked them, I'm like, well, do you have any history of UFO encounters? And he said, yes, I do. I've seen them twice. And so has my dad. I'm like, ooh, your dad, huh? And she's like, oh, yeah, me too. My father's a major psychical investigator in Europe, and I have light beings coming into my room at night. That's happened several times. I'm like, oh. And she says, they finally contacted me after finding out that this is a thing, that people have disappearing pregnancies. It's usually at 3 months, maybe.
I said it's 7 months. That's, man.
Yeah,
I think anybody who's ever been a parent, once you've heard that heartbeat and you felt the baby moving around, that's hard. That's a lot. And that's one of the hardest parts of this part of well, first of all, if you can get around the part of it's even going on, it's the next step, which is, well, wait a minute here, how do you process that?
Yeah, they heard the heartbeat too, by the way. I forgot to mention that. But they go home, they tell their parents. Their parents are understanding, except for the super religious ones who are a little bit upset. But they all got lots of support from people. And she felt okay about it. She's like, I know my child is alive. I know it. I can feel it. And I feel like he's in good hands. And I've talked to a lot of people who've had this experience, and usually they're taken to meet the child at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, that didn't happen with them, but it happened with other people I've talked to. And they've gotten to see not only their child, their adult, their grown-up child. One lady had her alien hybrid son come into the kitchen late at night when she went to get a drink of water.
Wow.
And they had a long conversation.
Wow.
He's like, don't you recognize me? And she's looking at him, pinching herself like, oh my God, this is really happening.
So, and then only because it'll fall behind if I don't ask it. Eventually in the chat, they disappear. But Melissa's asking a question. It kind of correlates with this a little bit. And what she was asking is it a rule that when contact is made, it continues? Like, are they marked for life? So in kind of relation to some of what we're talking about here, how they had those experiences when they were younger, do you feel that that's kind of the case?
Kind of, yeah. If someone is having contact, the chances are likely it's going to continue. However, I will put a caveat on that because there are people who are like, I hate this. Go away, go away. And with enough, if you make it very clear that you do not want this and do not accept this and do not give permission for this, period.
Yeah.
This can stop contact. Or what might be happening is they're just fine. We're not going to let you know that this is happening to you.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people have contact and never know it.
There's again, Samantha Moa that I mentioned. If you guys ever want to hear someone who gives a very personal, and she's one of a couple that are very good at this, but gives a very personal, raw, open, I guess, explanation of her experiences that's going on, because she's someone who's is experiencing this and has experienced this. It's pretty. It definitely shifts your paradigm. I'll put it that way. Terry Lovelace is another one that comes to mind. When I had him on, I remember asking him. I said, Terry, and if you don't want to talk about it, it's okay. But I said, just between you and I said, do you think that you've got maybe some children out there? And he told me, even when we were alive still, he said, I think I do. I really do. And I've noticed, and I've brought this up a couple times, and this isn't to say, like Geraldine, I remember asking her this because she's talked about quite a bit this. I said, why we seem to hear a lot about females experiencing this, but we're I guess, like the fathers in the stories, as it were. So have you, and your coming across these different implantation or pregnancies and things of that nature, are you experiencing 50-50 between male and female, or would you say that there are not as many cases of a male saying, yeah, I'm a father to an ET out there?
I suspect it's equal.
Okay.
But I will say that, yeah, I have had more female cases. But yeah, there's a guy in let's see, it's the book before, Onboard UFO Encounters. He had this happen. He calls her his star daughter. And boy, did he chokes up when he talks about her. It's very emotional for him. Yes, this happens to both men and women, like that guy in upstate New York. In fact, the subject of my next book involves a lady, but her name is Dolly, and she's a fully conscious contactee. I'm so excited about this book. I can't tell you, because a lot of people I've interviewed view this phenomena through the lens of fear. And she got sick of it early on. She's like 14 years old, and she had a major experience. And she's like, that's it. I am going to remember. I am not going to live this way. She's been having encounters her whole life. And she's continued to have them. She's fully conscious. And boy, oh boy, her story is probably the most extensive I have ever heard in my life. She's proved it to me. I don't think I've ever been more excited about putting out a book than this one I'm working on right now.
Very nice. So to this question right here that Zenze Bill has, which thank you first of all for hanging out in the chat tonight. If there are disappearing pregnancies, are there suddenly appearing pregnancies without the natural interaction beforehand?
Yes. I'm glad
Very
you brought that
interesting.
up. There was a lady I interviewed in Maine, and she had that happen. She's separated from her husband. She had not had intercourse, and she became pregnant. She's had 4 or 5 disappearing pregnancies, and one of them was an appearing pregnancy. And
really?
She went to the doctor, and he's like, "You're pregnant." And same with this lady in Florida, by the way. Same thing. She was not intimate with anybody, and she had a pregnancy appear. And the doctor's like, you're pregnant. And they're both like, no, I'm not. I haven't had sex. What are you talking about? Like, you're pregnant. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then they weren't.
I was gonna say, and I think you're right here. Oh, maybe see, I'm between two screens, so sometimes the StreamYard takes a little longer to kick in versus YouTube there. But I know Josh just asked a great question. I believe he was saying he believes this had happened to Geraldine Orozco as well, correct? Or I believe, well, I can see it right here. I can't see it over here. If it did, I don't remember that part off the top of my head. But that's very interesting. I mean, again, I guess what's interesting about this, and again, I don't ever like to speak on it too much because Samantha and Geraldine both do great jobs at hitting on this and explaining it. But somebody was asking one time, what is even the reason? I mean, what from your perspective, from the research you're done, what do you think is the reasoning behind this? What is the process? And has this to add on that? The second part of it is, do you think it's been going on for forever?
Yes and yes. And I think we know. I think we know the reason. I really do. I think we've got a really good handle on exactly why it's occurring. And I've heard the same story from separate contactees over and over again. My latest book, Wondrous, one of my favorite chapters, I put it in the last chapter because it's long and it's amazing. This lady, originally from California, she moved to the East Coast and then back, had a rough childhood with visitors coming to her bedroom, and it scared the daylights out of her. And finally, she faced it. And it's a long story. She had an appearing pregnancy, and it disappeared, of course. And finally, she had this long conversation with a gray alien. And he introduced himself. He says, "My name is Sen." And she said, "Oh, are you my son?" And he said, "Not as you would think of it. You did not give birth to me, but I am made of your genetics. So yes and no." And she said, "Why are you taking me?" And they said, "Because we are interested in your genetics." And here's the story I've heard of. Well, I was going to say 1,000 times, but that's exaggerating. I've heard it a lot. And I've read it in other cases from other researchers. They told her that we are having trouble reproducing. Our genetics have become damaged due to space travel and genetic manipulation. We changed our genetics to remove some of these harsher emotions so that we could do prolonged space travel. And now we're trying to reintroduce them to bring our emotions back, to make us more physical like you guys, and to reintroduce our ability to reproduce. They said, we have the same genetics as you, essentially. We once looked like you. And this I've heard before. The Greys are not as separate a species as you might think. They are actually, and a lot of these guys are much more human than we realize. And yeah, I do think it's been going on a very long time. If you look at ancient writings, whether it's in the Bible or other indigenous cultures have oral traditions, certainly Native American cultures, of sky gods and coming down to mate with humans and this sort of thing. Yeah, I think this has been going on a long time. I think they're upgrading humanity bit by bit, which explains why we're getting bigger and stronger and longer lived.
Yeah.
And they do seem to be interesting. Here's a really interesting case, real quick. A guy from Florida, I think his name was Jim, in Gainesville, Florida, had a hernia. Grays show up, and he's used to it by now because he's a contact. He's like, "You guys, if you're going to take me, would you cure my hernia?" I'm like, "Fine, we'll cure your hernia." And they did. and he said, "Why are you taking me?" And they said, "We are interested in your genetic potential to live a long time."
Interesting.
Yeah. And his grandfather, by the way, was 106.
Wow. That's a while. In terms of how long we live, some of, I know Dave Scott's talked about this quite a few times. Hey, it's not fair. Why are we living such a short lifespan? You think about it, as a human compares to some of the accounts we've heard of other species and their life.
As far as I know, the Greys live a few hundred years, 3, 4, 5, longer. I think that's the rule with most of these ETs. They're longer lived.
Well, I tell you what I'm gonna do, guys. Because I know that Josh Casey, I'm gonna bring you on here in a little bit. If you get ready, brother, I'll give you like 10, 15 minutes to get ready. He wanted to ask you some questions personally, and I told him because he helped me kind of get in contact with you. I have no problem doing that. And I might even open up the lines for the general chat to ask some questions. But before we get to that, Preston, I'd love, if you're okay with sharing, I'd love to hear about some of your own personal experiences that you've had going through this over the decades. I mean, have you had any sort of encounters yourself along the way?
Yeah, and I don't think they quite compare to some of the people I've talked to, but they're getting close. It's ramping up for me. It is. One early encounter was 1992. I'm driving home after talking to my brother Mark and Christy all night long, practically, about UFOs. I was going out of my mind with this subject. It's 1992. I'm still trying to absorb it. And I'm driving through Woodland Hills on their street, Golondrina. It's a little tiny street. I'm coming around this hairpin corner at 2 miles, 3 miles an hour. This is late July, about 11, maybe midnight. And I see what I thought at first was a bird swooping towards my car. It's a couple hundred feet up to the right. And I'm looking up and I'm like, well, that's not a bird. It's glowing. And I thought, well, maybe it's a firecracker because it's late July. And I'm like, well, it's still coming. It's coming. and boom, it's right in front of my car. It was an orb. And it was about as big as a golf ball. Actually, bigger than a golf ball, but not as big as a tennis ball, but thereabouts. Soft yellow light, not harsh.
Yeah.
Maybe white yellow. And it's right in front, as far away from the computer as I am now, a foot, maybe 2. And it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and stops, kind of looks at me. And I'm like, ah. And it goes over the hood of my car, dips down, almost scrapes against the cement and goes straight up. Of course, I crane forward and I look up at the windshield and I watch it disappear through the canopy in the trees and it's gone. And I always tell people, well, that's my sighting. Until years later. And by the way, I forgot about it. I completely forgot. I did not remember it till months later.
So for you, going home, the trip was just seamless. There was no transition of time.
Well, here's where it gets weird because someone's like, what happened next? I'm like, huh. I don't remember. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember going to bed. I've had other sightings, really good ones. And I always, well, I don't want to say always, but I remember and I write it down and I'm like, oh my God, you guys you never guess what happened. And I call up people and I'm like, I saw you. I did not turn around. And
you didn't pursue it on foot like her with her puppy in hand and chase down a 50-foot mantis. You didn't go for it.
No, but if, after seeing a UFO, I was just 3 minutes away from my brother's house. I would have turned around, is what I'm saying. And said, Mark, Christy, guess what? But I didn't do that. I had missing time. I'm pretty darn sure. And I started having 1992 was a huge year for me. Huge. We were camping that year. It was like a month later, August, up in Crater Lake. And we brought a flashlight, Marco, Christy, and I. Well, the whole family was there, but they all went to bed, and we stayed up late hoping to see UFOs. And darned if one didn't show up. Mark saw it first. He's like, I saw a light. I'm like, really? He's like, seriously, hand me the flashlight. And he flashes it into the sky, and we're all staring up, and boom, this light flashes us back. And I'm like, whoa! We're like, ah! And Mark flashes the light twice, and it flashes us twice back. Oh my God. So that was like a CE5 almost. And that's when I joined CSETI a month later, and we had more sightings. Oh, I just started getting hit by them over and over again. I had one sighting where they actually talked to me. Ugh.
Wow. Now, when you say talk, are you saying like verbally, like I am doing right now, or was it more of just a telepathic communication?
Telepathic message. It wasn't English words, but I got the message for sure.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, as they tell us, I guess, what was there something that led up to that? I mean, what led up to you even getting the message in the first place?
Yeah, there was a huge lead up, and I'll just do it real quick.
Yeah, no rush. We have time. We don't have anybody on for another hour and 2 minutes. So as long as that's how fast, for sure we'll be done by then. But if you've got the time, no rush. So
All right. Yeah. So I had interviewed this lady, Wendy, who was the lady who was healed, right?
Yeah.
I had mentioned that earlier. She also had hybrid babies. And once she woke up and all these grays were around her bed, she jumps up and kicks one in the neck, and its neck snaps.
Oh, geez. They're not very big. I mean, you could probably do some damage.
Yeah, I heard that, and I'm like, what?
That's a lot.
And I knew of another case where someone, Travis Walton punched one in the face. Mm-hmm. And I knew of a few cases, but I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot. That's a lot to take. I knew she was telling the truth, but I was like just trying to wrap my head around it. So I'm up there in my condo transcribing the interview. I record all the interviews. And I got to that part where she kicked her in the neck, and I'm just leaning back in my chair like, I wonder if that's for real. I mean, how can stuff like this happen in this world? And I got a really strong, irresistible impulse to run to the roof of my condo, which you don't do. You're not allowed on the roof.
Right.
And weirdly, I ran 3 stories down to get my glasses out of the car, because I wear glasses for driving. Mm-hmm. And I keep them in the car. I don't really need them for anything else. And came back upstairs and ran to the roof. And I'm standing on the roof thinking, what am I doing up here? How did this happen? I didn't even mean to go on the roof. It just happened. And I could not resist. And I was up there 10 seconds, maybe 20, when a UFO appeared across the street. Well, let me think. 100 to 200 feet away, because there was a tiny little parking lot and 2 spaces wide, and the LA River there, which is, maybe 50 feet.
Yeah.
And the apartment building across the way there. And it was right over the apartment building, right above the palm trees. And it was this giant golden sphere, or maybe slightly oval shaped. Could have been about 10 feet across, could be 20 feet. It was hard to say, because it was bright and fiery orange, and it blasted me with a message. It appears and it goes boom, and it says, hi, we're Wendy's ETs. You don't believe, huh? We're real. Watch this. Now, if you don't believe, watch this. We'll prove it. And again, this is not words, but that was the gist of the message. Like, hi, it's us.
Right.
Watch. We're real. And this thing goes, and it was still at first. It goes boom to the left, and then boom to the right, and boom to the left, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, going lower and lower and lower.
Putting on a whole show for you, huh?
Yeah, a total display for sure. And it was maybe 20 seconds, which is a long time.
Yeah.
Seeing a UFO darting around like nobody's business. And it disappeared. I'm like, oh my God. I should have called her up that night. I don't think I did. I think it was the next day. I'm like, Wendy, you're not going to believe it. Your ETs called me up. I mean, they came and they told me you're telling the truth. She's like, what do you mean? Of course I'm telling the truth. I'm like, yeah, I know, but they wanted me to know. Yes, I don't know, man. They were there. They told me. She's like, I told you. I mean, I told you they were real.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's so interesting you mentioned that too, because, because I'm trying to remember correctly, because I do remember you talking about this. Was this the second or the first time? Because there was another encounter you had, right? Where you actually had a camera was actually around you, right? And you said you never even thought to take the picture of it.
Yeah, I was same lady, Wendy.
Same way. She must be a lightning rod for that over there, I guess. Huh?
So I'm talking to her. I'm like, what? I'm like, I saw one. She's like, yeah, wasn't it amazing? I'm like, yeah, it was. But you know what? I wasn't ready. I would really like to see a UFO is what I told her. And she's like, well, you just saw one. I'm like, yeah, but and she's like, fine, I'll ask them. I'm like, what? Wait, you can do that? She's like, yeah, sure. I'm in contact with them all the time. And they talk to me. I talk to them. I'm like, okay. And she calls me back like a week or two later. Like, all right, it's set up. Let's go. You ready? And I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And it was a preset time and place, which is just off the 210 freeway in Pasadena. We parked on the freeway. I'm like, oh my God, you seriously want me to park on the freeway? She's like, yeah. Yeah, all right. So this was a rural area. There weren't any houses around, and there was this hill. And I brought my Christy, my sister-in-law, and her son, my nephew, and Wendy. So all four of us are tromping up this hill, and it's a big hill. I mean, it's pretty much a mountain, and it took us 20 minutes to get to the top, and Christy and James fell behind a couple of 100 yards. And Wendy and I get to the top. There's this little plateau, and she's like, here's where they said to come. I'm like, oh, this is it. And she screams, and she says, turn around, and grabs my shoulders and turns me around. And there it is, and it's right in front of us. It's twice as close as it was the first time. It's like 20 feet, 50 feet away. I mean, it's close. It looked like a house floating in the air right in front of us, like right across the street. I would say, 50 feet, and about the size of a small house, maybe a large room. Perfect sphere, covered with golden lights. It was gorgeous. I mean, that's the only word for it. It was just magnificent. It was so beautiful. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite that beautiful. It was covered in golden lights that were scintillating and sparkling in a way that normal lights can't do. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. We were jumping up and down. We're screaming. I didn't want to take my eyes off it. I didn't even think about the camera. I did not even think of it.
Yeah.
Because I could not take my eyes off of it.
I was to say, and that's always what seems, I mean, we've heard this time and time again. And first of all, even if you had a really good camera, which it sounds like maybe you did, for an example, I took a picture. We all know the moon is beautiful right now. It's just massive, right? I was driving back home from work the other night, and I don't normally see something and nearly want to just stop on the road, but I almost wanted to stop. I could not believe just how massive the moon. I mean, normally, we're talking holding a thumb up to cover. So I mean, I had to put my fist up to try and cover this up. It was just absolutely amazing. And I take out my phone to try and get a video and a picture, and I look back at it now, and that it's ridiculous. I would never put that on the internet. I would never show anybody that. But in person, that thing was so big versus what ended up on my little itty bitty screen. Anonymous Rex, thank you very, very, very much for that super chat. It looks like you might have a question here. Let's see. Preston, could you discuss your opinion of the 2019 Bainbridge Island Tic Tac event you covered on Encounter UFO? Question. Thank you. And thank you once again for that super chat. And then after this, I'm going to bring in, I got you backstage there, Josh. I'll bring you in just after that. Okay.
Yeah. Tic Tac incident is interesting because we have trained observers who are familiar with aircraft, and you can hear them, on the audio, because there's audio of this, and they're swearing and they're like, wow, look at that. We got it. Woo. It's clear that they're impressed. This is not the size of a Tic Tac either. This is big. And here's our government, talking about, this recent disclosure. We have 60, what is it, 144 sightings. And we think some might be balloons.
Oh, deflated balloons. They went a step further this time. Deflated balloons.
Or some might be, it could be China. Maybe it's Russia. Maybe it's us. That made me laugh out loud. I'm like, us? Aren't you us? I mean, like, wait, you're talking in full-on circles here. And you could hear them just aching to say the word. Maybe it's extra, like a parasite. And here's this Tic Tac incident. It went so in your face. It's on film. It's darting around. I mean, it's moving at super high speeds. It's got all the characteristics of these UFOs that we hear about so often. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
It's great evidence. And they're saying we don't know what it is. Liar. I don't believe you for a second. The pilots know what it is. They called it right off the bat. Look, it's a UFO. That's a very active area. I'm like, wow, I'm a bit surprised to hear that this was off the coast of Southern California. Because this is where there's so much activity. And I think, honestly, with the ETs, that's what I think we're dealing with here is ETs. Because there are some researchers that are like, this is a phenomena that wears different masks.
Yes.
I'm not so sure about that. Yes, there's weird stuff going on in some of these cases, and maybe not all of it is extraterrestrial, but let's face it, We have the saucers, Roswell, Aztec, the Paradise Valley crash, Kecksburg. I could go on. We have the alien bodies. How many whistleblowers do you need? All bets are off once that really comes out into the public arena. But we know what this is. At least the government does. This is aliens. And I think the aliens were showing off. Honestly, I think they're like, all right, we're going to do this again. They're doing a very carefully measured publicity campaign.
Yep.
They are on top of things. They know exactly how people are going to react. They know what they're doing. And I think they planned all of this. Honestly, I really do. That's speculation on my part. And I hate to speculate, but man, oh man, that's what the evidence to me is pointing towards.
I agree. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, really quick, because I know that Josh has some questions, and I agree with what you're saying, and there's a little more to hit on this with it, as far as the, it seems, and I've even heard Dave say this too, and I got to agree with him. It feels like there's been a countdown that's been going on for a while, and it feels like it's been exponentially sped up. We're coming to near the end of it. So with all that though, Josh, I'd like to bring in, thank you very much for helping me get in contact with Preston. I know you and Preston know each other quite a bit, so feel free to ask any questions you have. And then guys, like I said, in a couple minutes here, I'll open up the chat to get a couple questions in for Preston if anybody wants to hop in and ask any questions at all tonight. So Josh, thank you once again for hopping in the garage tonight.
Of course. First off, can you hear me? I just got this headset. Want to make sure it's working right.
I can. Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. Preston, it's so good to see you, man. It's so surreal because you're the first person I really got in contact with whenever I had my epiphany at the beginning of this year, before I even got back in contact with the Bledsoe family, who I grew up with. And initially I thought this was really cool. And then whenever I started realizing that it was real, it started freaking me out a little bit. And some of the things that you covered as far as like Zimbabwe and the healings and stuff like that, it really helped me put a lot of peace at mind. But I didn't realize at first when I got in contact with you either that you were also a former skeptic in all this. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels between me and you. And
yeah, I feel you. I freaked out too. I know exactly what that's. Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, I went through like a good month of like paranoia, and yeah, I happened to just pick up my phone one day and cut on YouTube, and you were live with Martin Willis. And as soon as I cut on, you were taking a phone call. It was pure chance that I got in contact with you, to be honest. I know you know that I've been having some orb sightings this year, especially my recent visits over to the Bledsoe family. First off, I want to ask you a question that's a little bit personal. I don't mind using my name, like talking to people in this community, but I live here in North Carolina in the Bible Belt, and you mentioned stuff about UFOs around here, and a lot of people look at you like you're crazy. But as far as the thing with the phenomenon having a connection with bloodlines, I recently found out that my very close family member of mine is having experiences as well, but it's more along the lines of paranormal, I guess, spirit, ghost type things. And that's completely okay with my family. And I haven't opened up to them exactly with what I'm going through, but I tried to hint at it a little bit, and I started getting bad vibes, so I just kind of dropped it. I don't understand, why is it so acceptable for people in certain areas of the world to believe in things like ghosts and spirits, but then as soon as you mention something like UFOs, you get looked at like you're crazy. Do you think I do believe that they're separate in a sense, but do you think there's a connection between all of this? Is my question.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I do. I started, the more I talk to people who are having encounters, they had a wide variety of paranormal events, and it's not at all unusual for a contactee who start having major experiences to start to have all kinds of paranormal events, and that definitely includes ghostly encounters. And I myself, started having weird paranormal events right along when I started investigating and seeing UFOs. So I kind of know. It's weird. I've heard that. I've seen that before. People would be like, "Oh yeah, ghosts, fine. UFOs, I don't believe in those." And I've had contactees like, they're fine with seeing ETs, but they're like, "No, ghosts scare me." And I'm like, "Wow, but you see aliens, but now you're bothered about ghosts?" And sometimes these two phenomena come right on the same time. I mean, I investigated ghosts a lot, actually, because a lot of people were saying, I'd ask them, oh, you saw a UFO, anything else? Oh, yeah, my house is haunted. I'm like, really? And that happens a lot with contactees. They see shadow people. They'll start having...
I've experienced shadow people, Preston. Just recently, actually, Willie knows this. That's kind of why I'm asking you this, to be honest. I just opened up the Big Willie and a couple people in this chat here not too long ago about that. It scared me, to be honest. I still don't know much about shadow people. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, I'm glad you did, because I wonder about, I wasn't getting a whole lot of reports until more recently, in the last 10 years, I would say. And that's regular for people who are having contact of any kind, is shadow people. And I don't know quite what's going on here. I know a lady, the lady in Florida I'm talking to, she sees them all the time too. And I'm like, what do you think they are? She's like, I'm not sure. I think they're interdimensional entities. Maybe not human spirits. But yeah, orbs could be spirits and ETs too. Some of the orbs are absolutely what we would think of as ghosts. And they will suddenly elongate, and there's your grandma who passed away. Or sometimes they elongate and it's a gray stepping out of the orb. That happens.
Yeah.
The whole orb thing is really amazing. Some of them are like, I think, probes from the craft, but some I think are actually entities themselves. And when you start seeing stuff regularly, that's a big sign that they are aware of you. They know. Yeah,
that actually kind of went straight into my next question. I was going to ask you, because recently I've seen some orbs that kind of look like they change in shape a little bit, or in size, which I guess you're aware of that. I was going to ask you if you think there's the orbs could cover a variety of different phenomena. I've also seen 3 different colors now: orange, a white, and like a goldish amber colored orbs. So I've been looking at like compressed energy, and I've been thinking maybe it's, like you said, more than one different type of phenomena.
Yeah, there's hasn't been a whole lot of research on orbs, surprisingly, and now people are getting a lot of interest because there's the photographic evidence is outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
I know a contactee. He has a picture of him who was just covered in these orbs, and people have orbs that follow him around. And I think they are probably different things. I think some are spirits. I think some are ETs. I think some are probes, and I think some are energy that's just sort of manifesting. I honestly don't know. I went to see a channeler once, and I'm talking to Christy, actually, my sister-in-law, and Wendy was there too. Lady I've been talking about. And suddenly I see this orb coming between us, and it had this weird interdimensional look to it. And I start tracking it with my eye, and Christy's like, I see it too. And so it's like, Wendy's like, we're all watching this. This is inside. And so they will come into your house through the walls and stuff. And I think there might be around us a lot more than we realize. I am not sure what we're dealing with here.
I've seen them pop up in pictures. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I've seen pictures where a couple people I've talked to recently took a picture and didn't think there was anything in the frame, and then they look at the picture afterwards and see what looks like orbs. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And Chris Bledsoe just told me that I've known for a little bit now, he's had orbs pop up into his house. But like you said, it's not like the balls of light that he sees outside. It's exactly like what you said, almost like a more, I don't know, like ectoplasmy kind of spiritual type energy thing.
I've heard some people say, well, if it's got fuzzy edges, it's probably a spirit or an entity, and if it's a hard edged thing, it could be an actual alien probe. I don't know if that's true, but someone did tell me that, and I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. I have to watch out for that.
That's a whole nother part that we kind of left out with all this for you, is that you study a lot of this, as you've mentioned along the way. Have you written any books in regards to just a strictly paranormal, book of any sense?
Oh yeah, I put out a couple of books on ghosts, Bigfoot, because that came marching into my life. Boy, I did not want that. I'm like, no, please, no, not Bigfoot. It might be real. What if it's real? And it was, of course. And yeah, levitation, out-of-body experiences. I've looked into all of this because it is connected. I mean, I had a case where I was investigating a haunted apartment, and it was bad. It was like really bad ghosts, all the way up to possession. And they moved out and had a major UFO encounter like a week later. How does that happen? That is weird.
Right. I just got another question for you too. I'm sorry, Josh. I'm sorry, really quick. I'll just get this question and then you can go ahead and go for it. Melissa was actually asked, she said, what is Preston's stance on people associating, and it's funny, we just brought this up, Bigfoot, Dogman, and other cryptids with the UFOs, especially around Skinwalker Ranch? Does he think that there's any correlation?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I looked into Bigfoot, and I can tell you unequivocally, conclusively, it's real. The evidence stretches back hundreds of years. It's not just eyewitness accounts. There's hair samples, there's footprints. It's real. There's a lot of footage. It's all over the world. And multiple witness cases. I mean, the evidence is outstanding. And most people who see Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, it goes by different names depending on where you are, don't see UFOs. And most people who have UFO encounters aren't going to encounter a Bigfoot. But there's a smattering of cases, 50 or 100 of them, where they appear at the same time. People see Bigfoot coming out of a UFO or climbing into one or are taken on board a UFO, and there's a darn Bigfoot inside the UFO. And I had my own case, and that's what got me into it. This guy in Canyon Country had a UFO land in his backyard. Bigfoot came the next night, and then he had a huge poltergeist outbreak. You can't tell me this stuff is not connected. I don't know what is going on here. Maybe it opens a rift. Maybe one attracts the other. Bigfoot is telepathic, by the way. There's lots of cases where Bigfoot reads people's mind, and the ETs are profoundly telepathic. There could be something going on there. Something's going on. I'm glad you brought that up, Josh, because
me and Sonny, I just like you said, I never thought I'd believe in UFOs until a year ago, but it wasn't until about a couple of weeks ago I started accepting the possibility of Bigfoot whenever people started telling me that he could be an interdimensional spiritual being. And I'm thinking, well, I've seen orbs pop up, in thin air. And then a Pork and Beans podcast, I think, have you been on there before with
once,
Brian? Yeah. Me and Sonny from Paranormal Chop Shop are going to be on there on Tuesday, and he was just showing us some pictures. It's actually what really got it on my mind, where you might have seen this picture. I think he said he saw something go into the woods, and he took a picture, and just like I was saying earlier, when he took the picture, he didn't see anything, but when he looked at the actual picture, there's like orbs everywhere, and he's thinking maybe possibly Bigfoot could be an interdimensional being. Those orbs were his energy or something along the lines of that. I definitely believe it's connected in some type of way, like you said.
Yeah, definitely. Some of these Bigfoot are very like interdimensional. Like I had a case where a guy had a Bigfoot appear and disappear in front of him. Literally, I mean, not like run away. It became visible and then became invisible. And there's a number of cases like that. And I think that I think there's probably different types. Some might just be a primate like us, but we're interdimensional too. I mean, we can go out of body. And if you're super spiritually advanced, there's cases of people who have the ability to levitate or teleport or turn invisible and do all kinds of stuff. So I think
you wrote a book on astral projection. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say you wrote a book on or something about astral projection, didn't you?
I love the astral projection. I got really, really into it. That's kind of what brought all of this on in a weird way. Because in 1984, my mom passed away. And I saw her ghost. Didn't believe it for a second. But started reading about astral projection, started trying to do it. And that was exactly when I started, the UFO research. So that totally blew my belief system apart into little pieces. Yeah, we can go out of our body. I taught people how to do it. I've written a book on this. It's not that hard. It's amazing. It's so much fun.
Wow, that's
cool. Just really quick. Oh, sorry, Josh. I was gonna say, just quick question here from Rainy Cruz. and I don't know if Preston, if you know or are familiar with this case, but they were saying a rock geologist's chest got burned from the UFO. From a UFO fire exhaust in the Falcon Lake incident. Are you familiar with this one or no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's Stephen McCulloch, Canada. Got too close to a landed UFO. I don't think they intentionally burnt him.
Mhm.
There are a few cases of burns, and most of them I think are accidental. I'm not going to say all. But he definitely approached a landed UFO and it took off, and he had these grid marks on his chest where there was a sort of exhaust thing on this UFO. It's a weird case. He did hear the ETs talk. I don't know if he actually saw them, but the door was open when he approached. He's trying to speak to them in different languages. They didn't answer. And it caught his shirt on fire. He got a headache, started vomiting, rushed to the hospital. He lost a lot of weight, diarrhea, the whole deal, and was examined by, it was like 40 doctors. And they said it's got to be radiation sickness. His blood lymphocyte level dropped dramatically, dangerously. Yeah, he was pretty badly injured. Don't approach a landed UFO too close. That would be my advice. Make sure it's cooled off, because these things come in hot.
Which is kind of even what happened with Travis Walton, right? Because he kind of thought it was like gonna. Yeah, I was to say that's what he thought, right? It was like, oh, I don't think it was on purpose, but obviously when he got struck, it's quite a bit. One more quick question, then Josh, if you got any more questions, go ahead. And also anybody else that might want to hop in. I don't want to hold up Preston too long if no one else is going to hop on here tonight. But another one from Melissa that says, during astral projection, do you fly or think of where you want to be and you're there? How's that work?
Yeah, that's sort of how you do it. You have to set your intention. It's a lot like learning a musical instrument, learning to ride a bike, walking a tightrope maybe, or a new computer. It takes a lot of focus. And you pop out, and you finally get to that point where you've done it. You're like, wow, oh my God, it works. It's amazing. It's real. And you freak out, of course, and it can get a little scary. But then you're like, okay, what did I want to do? I wanted to go somewhere. And it's hard to do it on the physical plane, because you're like, oh, I want to go see my sister-in-law's house. And I'm like bouncing along at 5 miles an hour. I'm like, shoot, I know I can only stay awake a minute. I'm not going to get there. And if you really focus, you're like, zoom, you teleport. And I've got to be able to do that. And yeah, so I would say that you can actually, it's like teleporting. Once I was like trying to get to the moon, because Robert Monroe did it. And I'm like, hey, he's a huge out-of-body guy. And other people are talking about it. And I'm like, well, hell, if they can do it, so can I. And I meant to do it for the longest time. Finally popped out. I'm like, oh, look, there's the moon. That's right. I wanted to go there. And I'm flying towards it. And I'm like, I've only got like 5 minutes. I can't stay awake more than 5 minutes. I'm not that good. I'm like, faster, faster, faster. I'm like, just get there already. And then boom, whoosh. I don't like talking about this, honestly, because people are like, yeah, sure, you went to the moon. Right. But honest to God, I did. And I landed on the, I almost wanted to swear there.
Oh, you can swear on here. Joe and Ben light it up. I usually don't, you feel free to talk.
I usually don't swear, but this deserves, I landed on the fucking moon. Let me just put it out. I did. And you believe me or not, don't believe me. I don't care. Do it yourself and you will see. It is wild when you're like, oh my friends would never, no one's ever going to believe this.
I never thought I'd believe in the remote viewing. Or with the government with the remote viewing stuff, I always thought that was nonsense. And I've had somebody, prove me without a doubt that remote viewing was real. I mean, blew my mind, really. Told me something they had no possible way of knowing. So, yeah, if they can do that, I believe it's a possibility for sure.
Another question here from Y, and this is an in-depth question for sure, kind of opinion on the Rendlesham Forest incident, that's a broad question. That's a big incident. So
yeah, well, there's 8-10 books on this case. It's real. Yeah. For those who say it's not real, like, you're out of your mind. How many witnesses are there? Hundreds. It's not just Colonel Holt and Jim Peniston and Larry Warren. There's a lot. It's real. I think it was attracted by the nuclear materials there. it's a 3 days, 4 days. I mean, it's more than that. Long incident, entities involved. Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy case. 1981. It's absolutely real for sure. That's my opinion. I didn't investigate it personally, but I did hear Larry Warren speak, even though he got kind of lambasted for some of the things he said. It's a controversial case, and the better the case is, the more likely you're going to be attacked viciously.
Preston, you don't want to start writing the numbers or the ones and zeros.
Oh yeah, I remember that. There was weird symbols on the craft that as well, which I thought to my mind, maybe it just says Toyota in alien language. What is that? Yeah, he apparently got some weird download of these numbers, which I've heard in other cases.
Coordinates, aren't they? I'm sorry. You're not talking about the hieroglyphic looking things, aren't you? If I'm not mistaken, the Rendlesham Forest didn't later on he started getting I can't think of what it's called right now. The ones and zeros.
Yeah, binary code.
Yeah. Binary. Didn't it turn out to be coordinates? And it's so synchronistic that led into the question I was about to ask whenever you get done with that, Big Willie. It ended up being coordinates for like spots of significance around the world, like pyramids and anomalies and stuff, didn't it? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that's what he says. So, which I find really interesting. That's your kind of really typical download type thing. But there were also symbols on the craft as well. So both turned up in that case. Some craft do have symbols on the Lonnie Zamora case. There's a number of cases. It's a very interesting case, and it's got levels and levels and levels to it. And I think some of those guys had real honest to God contact. And his health suffered too. Jim Peniston, I think it was.
Yes, it did. Spooky, thank you first of all for being here and showing support every single night. Has a great question. He said if he's missed it, and I don't think we covered this, but he says, has Preston have opinions or insight on the Vatican's role in the global UFO cover-up? Yeah,
I do. And they're on my naughty list along with the banking industry and the pharmaceutical industry and these 1%ers. How stupid do they think we are? We know they know. They know we know they know. It's ridiculous. And for them to cover up this information and then say there's nothing to it is so disingenuous, and it's just a big fat lie, and I'm really unhappy about it. I mean, how hard is it to tell the truth? Why cover it up? What benefit is it? You're getting me mad. They're greedy, greedy, power hungry people who do not have our best interests in mind. That's one of the reasons I'm in this field, and I'm not giving up until we get told the truth. I don't think they're ever going to do it. I think disclosure will happen, but they're kicking and screaming the whole way. And I think the ATs will come finally, just like, all right, we're done, and you're out.
I remember talking to Ben about this one time. Oh man, almost 2 years ago. I said, Ben, who represents us, right? Like when whatever contact's going on, whether it be with the government or individuals, it's a kind of scary thought if it's not just your everyday individual, because if it's someone higher up the hierarchy of the chain of command, they're never going to allow that power dynamic to shift. Why would they want it to, right? And so it's always been interesting to me how we're being represented, I guess. Who and what represents us besides your everyday contactee that, let's be honest, there's been a running agenda for years behind them to make them look ridiculous. So it's something that's always weighed heavy on me for sure. Pepe H has an interesting question though. Can beings follow you while you're astral projecting?
Sure. They can follow you while you're in your body. Astral projection is safe. It is absolutely safe. It's as safe as sleeping. The fact of the matter is we're all doing it every night. We really are. You are conscious on the astral planes. I go there and I see my family. I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, hey. I'm like, you're out of body. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, are you going to remember it? No. I'm like, wait, what? How can you be conscious here and not know?
Wow.
And it's weird. we live almost separate lives. Our minds are compartmentalized. So my point is, we do this all the time, and there are invisible beings around us constantly. And yes, astral projection can attract spirits. I did have like some haunting problems going on. And finally I went out of body. I'm like, hey, dude, what are you in? Who are you? He's like, oh, my name's Mac. I'm like, Mac, what are you doing in my house? It's time to go. And
I love that so much.
I pulled him out of my house, and I went back and I searched and I found another. I'm like, hey, what's your name? Oh, I'm Will. I'm like,
whoa, was it me?
No, he was a grayish hair, thin face. He was kind of an older guy. And I'm like, you have to go. And yeah, I've had a few scary experiences where like you pop out of body and there's earthbound spirits and they come at you. And I'm like, oh, bye. I'm going back into my body. You're supposed to project love. I'm like, oh, I love I'm not ready for that. I'm not quite there yet.
Oh, man. Ben, really quick, unless Preston wants to add more, we did cover the Galileo project. That's the only reason I skipped over your question. Unless you have something more you'd want to add to that, Preston, there is another question from Anthony there at the bottom. Which is what do you think the Lucifer has seen, and what, if anything, they rent sharing? Which is the telescope, I believe, Anthony, if that's what you're referring to, and if you're not, you can correct me. But what are your thoughts on that? I know that kind of brings us back to the previous question a little bit again.
Oh, well, that's a loaded question. I'm not a religious guy. Let me preface that.
Okay.
I do think that there's probably evil. Well, yeah, I know there's evil spirits. And I think there's probably angelic and demonic spirits out there. I've done research into that. There's some bad ghosts out there, inhuman spirits even. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there's God and the devil like we think of it in organized religion. That's not what I've seen out of body, honestly. And I got really interested in it more recently. Like, what about hell? What's hell? What is that like? Because I haven't seen, an ultimate God or anything. I've basked in the light that near-death experiences describe. And you get a feeling of source for sure. Like there is a God. And as we were thinking, and there is an evil force. I mean, just look at Earth and you can tell there is evil. It does exist. And I went to these lower realms and they are not pleasant. You cannot get people's attention. They're lost in despair. They are locked in grief and addiction and anger and just negative emotions. And then there's sort of a realm right above that where everyone's kind of fine, but it's still a lower level. It's like a mall or it's not a natural setting. The upper realms are bright and beautiful and no shadows and no night. They're amazing. And these lower levels are like not nice. And I go there and people like attack me and I'm like, whoa, hey, I didn't touch you. And I'm walking around this one place trying to explore. I'm like, gosh, I wonder, am I making this up? I don't think I am. I've gotten proof before I'm out of body. I appeared as an apparition in front of somebody and they saw me. Wow. So I know it's real and I've seen them, but I'm like, huh. So I came up to this one kid. He looked like not pretty harmless. I'm like, are you dead? And I just asked him and he gave me this look like, are you an idiot? He says, we all are. I'm like, oh, and I'm looking around at everybody. And so I'm like, And I came up to another lady. She's sitting at a table with her friends. I'm like, are you dead? And she's like, yes, of course.
So matter of factly.
Yeah. And I'm like, really? Because I'm not. And that was the wrong thing to say. Because every head in that place turned and looked at me with this cold, evil stare like, oh, what? You're one of those guys. And I'm like, oh, bye. Yeah, there are lower hellish realms. I don't think it's a lake of fire, though. You could create that if you want. People put themselves into that. I'm not going there. It's very uncomfortable the lower you go. My friend died of alcoholism, and I popped out of my body, and he was in the darkest place I've ever been, and he's screaming. He was very unhappy. He's like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready. Help. Ah, he's screaming. He's like in hell. And I'm like,
Wow.
Roger, you're going to be fine. I'm going to try to help you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to do my best. Because I've been able to cross people over in a few cases. Because I read about other people
Really?
doing it. And I'm like, hey, if they do it, I'm going to do it. Yeah, that's a complete other story. But yeah, I prayed for Roger and went back and saw him. He was in a better place bit by bit until he got up all the way to those, what I would call the garden realms or the heavenly realms,
Yeah.
where it's really beautiful.
Another really quick question from Melissa, and this is one that I think, Josh, for you probably hits home. I know it hits home for me too, growing up in a very religious family, is if they talk in the Bible about flying in chariots of fire, do you think that this was just a UFO?
I think probably in a lot of cases it was, because the idea of extraterrestrials and other planets was not popularized until the late 1800s, early 1900s is when even people thought of that sort of thing. And I think we had a tendency to just say, well, angels, demons, astronomical phenomena. And a lady in Maine that I interviewed, the ETs had all kinds of messages for her. They told her, I think I may have mentioned this, if you don't stop putting out the greed and negativity, you're going to destroy your planet like we did. They told her,
Wow.
Tell people to stop eating meat. It's not good for them. They told her if people should start disappearing from this planet, it's being done by us for the universal good. So there's going to be huge hurricanes. Katrina is nothing. It's going to be much worse. They said, we've been upgrading the genetics of humans and also cats and dogs to make them more emotionally intelligent. And they said,
wow.
Who you thought were angels, that was us. All those recordings you have of angels, that was actually us. So yeah, I think some of them probably were. I'm not going to say all because I looked into angels and I'm like, wow, those are real. They really are.
Now, have you ever had an encounter with an angel?
I sometimes wonder. There was one time I had a really weird experience where I'd gone to visit a friend's house and my car wouldn't start, and I tried to jump start it. It was an old, clutch, and it rolled down the hill, and the engine didn't start. And so I'm pushing this car all around LA, trying to get home, pushing it. And I'm a young man.
Task.
I didn't know what to do. I couldn't find their house, and this guy just appears. And I'm like, whoa, and he's like, here, I'll help you. And he was just super nice. I don't know if he was an angel or just a really nice guy, but he was an angel in my book because he took the battery out of his car and took the battery out of my car and put his battery in my car and started it and put my battery back in, took his battery out. I mean, he spent an hour rescuing me.
Wow.
To me, that's an angel, but I can't say it was supernatural. But I think that sort of thing, they come. And, I've heard a lot of stories like this where people will just appear out of nowhere and help you.
Yeah.
So maybe that was. I was happy. Let me tell you, I'm like, if I could ever pay back that guy, I would.
Well, I tell you what.
Well, I've had this thought that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in case anybody else wants to hop in, I put up the last one for anybody who might want to. That's all I'm going to put out there for the last one, because we only got about 19 minutes before Lynn gets going with Samantha here tonight, Samantha Mowat over at Spaced Out Radio. But I was going to do one last round table here for you and Josh, if you had a question for him, and then Preston, you as well, to see if there's any other questions in the chat. So please feel free to go ahead, Josh. I was just letting anybody in the chat know if they wanted to ask. You got about 3-4 minutes to get in, or I'm going to cut it off for them, okay?
Okay, yeah, I got one quick question that relates to what you were just saying, actually. I've had a thought that angels could be like some extra dimensional type of alien being, maybe just high up on the charts, or something. But when I think about all these ancient anomalies and stuff that are clearly, way more advanced than what we had capabilities of making, especially nowadays, it looks like there's a pyramid on Antarctica. That one really gets me. You said something earlier about these beings saying that, they destroyed our planet. Do you think that when it relates to, say, the flood that you hear about in every single religion pretty much, that maybe there was an extraterrestrial species or multiple multiple extraterrestrial species may be working right down here with us, helping us, and maybe they helped us to the point where we advanced too fast, like before maybe our souls advanced and we destroyed ourselves or something. I don't know. It's just a thought I had. Honestly, it kind of came in a dream. I just want to know your thoughts on it. Real personal.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. The lady I'm talking to in Florida, Dolly, the ETs told her that. They said, yeah, we messed up. We advanced, the previous civilization too fast, gave them technology. They ended up destroying themselves. That's why we're very careful with how we're treating you guys. There have been previous advanced civilizations numerous times. It's not just Atlantis. This has been going on. And yeah.
I'm sorry, an Atlantean told me that in my dream. I'm not making this up. Wow. I'm sorry. That tripped me out. I'm so sorry. This guy in the dream, he told me he said that Atlantis was the, I guess, top capital of the world or something, and that we advanced too fast and we destroyed ourselves. It's this weird dream that came back to me piece by piece. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Whenever you said that, it just really surreal.
No, it's really cool talking to you, Josh. I'm glad you came on because, yeah, that's exactly what it's insane to think that. Yeah, it is. To hear that from so many different sources. And when I heard you say that, I'm like, oh, wow.
My heart's beating fast.
Yeah. Now, what do you guys think? Oh, go ahead, Josh. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you. That actually got my heart beating fast because that was a really intense dream that I just had. I think that I had that dream for a reason. I definitely believe that now. Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say real quick, because I hear this all the time from people, like, these are demons. I'm like, hold on a second, they're fallen angels. What about the angels who haven't fallen? What about them? So are all ETs demons? That makes zero sense. There's more angels who haven't fallen. And so why not say that some of these are angels, as we would think of them, rather than demonic? And I studied this whole demon thing, which is real, but it's a separate phenomenon. I don't think it's this. I really don't. I just wanted to throw that out there because there are different explanations for UFOs. And I think some might be time travelers, and some might be interdimensional, and some might be cryptoterrestrials. But I think mostly we're dealing with extraterrestrials from other planets, people who are more alike us, really, than different.
That's one question. I'm glad you kind of just brought up the time thing a little bit, because that's something I'm kind of curious about that I forgot to ask you, actually, was as far as why we did cover the opinions on the Rendlesham incident. So if you go back just a little bit, Preston did cover that one. But the whole idea that we've heard stories where people are missing time, but you're saying there have actually been some stories that you come across where they seamlessly are put back into the timeline with no missing time. And you've had some cases similar to this?
Yeah, it's going to be in my next book. I can't wait to get this book out. She would be like gone for a week, and they put her back that night. I've had one lady, she was cured of a car accident. It took her 2 hours to cure her. They put her back in the scene of the accident minutes later. And there's people who've gone back in time. They will show you the past. They will show people the future. They can do stuff that's out. I mean, it's crazy. It's really hard to wrap my head around sometimes, but they can do stuff with time that we have we can't even imagine.
So amazing. Why? No worries to be sorry. I do know that he had answered that. So if we go just a little bit there, but yeah, the time thing, I think that only reinforces a little bit more how time is just not linear, at least in the sense that we understand it. Doesn't mean that it is what it is. It's just our understanding of it is not there yet, right? Just ignorance at this point is all it is, I believe.
Yeah, well, have an out-of-body experience. Go to the other side and you'll get a taste of it. Time it's not the same. It collapses there. It is weird.
Yeah.
Now, do you still believe in the multiverse, Preston? Because I do believe that time, like what you're saying about time, like maybe these things that can traverse outside of it, but I feel like the multiverse could also be real. Do you agree with that?
Yep, I think we probably do have probable realities and alternate realities, and the universe is like a fractal. It's branching out in all different directions, and every choice we make puts us on another timeline, kind of. I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to the whole Mandela effect. I don't even know what to think of that. I mean, I really don't. But
Right.
that comes up with all of this. And yeah, I think there probably are alternate realities and multiverses, and it's a lot simpler and more complicated at the same time than we imagine.
I
Yes,
completely
sir.
agree. I recently came up with this saying that uh, fate is real, but our destiny is determined by how we respond when fate knocks at our door. I don't know. That just works for me. I feel like certain things are completely out of our control and maybe they're meant to happen, but we still have the free will to respond to it. Um, that's
Yeah,
just, that helps me.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
We are autonomous beings. I think that's one of the main ET agendas. They're trying to wake us up to the fact that we are very powerful beings with all kinds of abilities, and it's up to us. But we can do telepathy. We can do all these things that they do. That's what Jesus said. All these things I have done, you shall do, and greater.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's absolutely true. And that's the ET's message too, by the way. Another ET said, "Love is the answer for humankind." That's coming from a gray alien. I love that.
Yeah. It is pretty amazing that with all of this stuff, I always find it fascinating that we kind of, some people try to put it in a box that they can understand and investigate and I guess explore every facet of it. And for me, I've definitely resided to the fact that I'm just going to enjoy the journey wherever it ends up going. And I guess since we have about 10 minutes left here, let me ask you both that, and we'll start with you, Josh. What are your thoughts on disclosure, whatever that might be, but the full-on business where we're all like, oh yeah, they're here and it's just general knowledge? What do you think? If you just had to guess a timeline, what are you thinking? Are we coming close to the end here of things finally being all out on the tables at work, cards all on the table?
I can definitely see that it's getting more accepted where I'm starting to get better where I can kind of fish it out of people and pick up vibes. But then it's so weird. There's like almost like the Mandela effect thing. It's like two different timelines. There's still so many people that just, they completely are oblivious to it. It seems like to me. Like when I mentioned something about the Pentagon UFO reports, they're like, "What are you talking about?" But then other people are all on board with it. But I almost feel like it's maybe two, like a good reality and a bad reality, like with the multiverse thing. That's kind of why I asked that. I feel like if we don't, get our shit together really as a species and, stop thinking about our differences and like, race and politics and crap, we're going to end up self-destructing just like that crazy ass dream I just had. But maybe if we can use this phenomenon, it can actually like bring people together. And I know it's going to be scary for a lot of people, but hopefully it will bring people together. Maybe that will save us. That's my opinion. I don't know exactly how soon it is, but I feel like it's coming up really soon.
Very interesting. And what are your thoughts on this, Preston?
What Josh said. Yeah, I agree. I don't know if our government is really ever going to come clean, honestly. But I think they're forced to do it because if they don't, no one's ever going to believe them ever again. So they kind of have to. They have no choice. And I think the ETs are probably going to come one way or another. I just cannot see this lasting a whole other generation. Cat's out of the bag. Everyone knows what UFOs are. They're seeing them all the time. We're going to destroy our planet if we don't start working together, coming together in love and truth and, kindness. Love is the answer. I do believe that. So I'm hoping that we just can get there and
100%.
just end this cover up, and then the ETs will show up. I think that's one of the main things. One of the main barriers to open official contact is this stupid cover up.
I love this from Melissa here. She goes, I can't wait so Big Willie has an actual alien on the show to interview one day. Listen, Ben and Joe have already had Cinnamon Terry on here, okay? Cinnamon Terry is a bona fide, genuine alien. So it's already happened, Melissa. Cat's out of the bag. I guess let me, just for the fun of it, because we have about 5 minutes here and we're going to wrap things up. But do you guys think on this, and I guess I can start with you as well, Josh, do you think there are those aliens or ETs walking among us that maybe we've already hung out with and are influencing this topic as a whole currently?
I definitely do. Preston kind of just that dream I just told you about. I was not why my heart was pounding just a minute ago whenever I was talking about that. As soon as he said Atlantis, that hit me so hard because the guy in my dream, I think the whole download thing is just real. I think that's why they're going to schoolyards. And Preston just, wasn't that your last book, Preston, about schoolyards?
Yeah.
I really think, I really do think that hopefully, you know, there might be, I'm sure there are some bad ones, but I think there's some good ones that don't want to see us self-destruct. And I know people I know a family, you know, who has Chris Bledsoe. You guys know that he's been healed, so I know there has to be some good ones out there. You know, they I think they're hopefully, you know, want to see us succeed, but I think it's ultimately up to us. And I apologize, I got kind of off. My brain just went racing everywhere there.
No worries.
I definitely think they're among us, no doubt. There are cases where they are seen in places they're not supposed to be seen. A bunch of cases in casinos. There's a case I know of cases at school, cases at bus stops, convenience stores, gas stations. I mean, I could go on. And there's been a few times I'm at a UFO convention. People approach my table and I'm like, wow, look at this guy. Look at his eyes. Oh my God. And goes to my sister-in-law and she's talking to him and she turns to me. She's like, did you see his eyes? I'm like, yes, I did. She's like, I think he was an alien. I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me. He had
What's
a real
up, Gary?
dreamy quality. Gary.
Gary Voorhees Jr. doing some amazing work himself. But yeah, so let's get wrapped up here because Lynn's getting ready to go live in a couple minutes with Samantha. And for anybody that's been dealing with this, and Preston, you've done an amazing job covering some of the children or the possible pregnancies that are going that way. And I'm sure that's something that might come up in their topic tonight. So Josh, is there anywhere people can follow you? If you'd like to put that out there, please feel free.
I'm going to be starting a podcast here soon. I don't know exactly when, but I know I'm going to help co-host Chad Smith next Saturday with Preston. Is going to be doing another interview.
Very nice.
Podcast. And Barbara Jean Lindsay will be on there tomorrow, and I'll also be on the pork and beans Tuesday at 2:00, I believe.
It's awesome.
Very nice. Well, I tell you what, Josh, I'm going to take you backstage here then really quick, and I will get Preston all set and wrapped up. I appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us and for helping get us in contact together so we were able to make this awesome episode happen tonight. Really appreciate it, brother. Oh, he already left. I was going to say, I was just going to take him backstage. He didn't have to leave. All right. So Preston, once again, guys, I have all the links in the show notes here. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can scroll down. They'll be right there. If you're listening in podcast format in a future date, you will also be able to scroll down and everything will be in the show notes for you. But Preston, if I did miss anything, please feel free to tell people where they can find you. Anything else you'd like to let people know about, please feel free. The floor is yours.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, thanks to Josh for, setting this up, and hi to Renee and Thurston and Gary and all the other familiar names I saw there in the chat room. There's quite a few of you. I do have a website, PrestonDennett.weebly.com. You can find all my books there. I'm on Facebook, of course, Twitter. I've got a YouTube channel. My stuff is on Amazon. I've got another book coming out. Super excited.
Heck yeah.
I am just gung-ho with all this. I love it. I'm having so much fun right now.
I'll tell you what I'm excited for, because I've been so new into all of this, is that I came in before everything shut down for a long time. So whenever things finally happen again, whenever we finally have some sort of a get together, I'm excited. There's so many people that we talk, if not daily, weekly at least. I'm really excited for when we can finally meet some people in person. So hopefully one day I'll be able to shake your hand in person and say thank you properly. So we'll see what happens. But all right, Preston, well, I'll tell you what, like I said, you guys follow obviously the Chad Smith podcast. You guys can look that up as well. He goes live in the mornings generally, and I believe he'll be next Sunday, not this coming Sunday, but next Sunday in the afternoon, he will be on there with them as well. So you guys, thank you so much. Preston, I'm going to take you backstage and get everybody out of here for tonight. If you want to hang out for a second, I think Josh did pop back in. He might have a question for you once we go off the air here. So I'm going to move you backstage for just a minute. Okay, guys. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Looks like Ben has plans already. We're going to do a garage retreat summer 2022. Oh, yeah. hide your kids, hide your wife. I'm just kidding. I don't know why I said all that, but all right, guys, we do have plans for it for sure. And like I said, please go check out Lynn Wallington. We'll be going live here in a couple minutes. I want to thank each and every one of you once again for coming in and hanging out. And like I said, I will not be here next weekend, but the following weekend after that, I will have Nicole Sackett, as well as the big live event that Ben and Joe will be doing with JoJo Bone. I forget the name of the bar or the location, but it will be right there in Austin, Texas, I believe, unless it's Taylor, Texas. Dang it, I guess I don't know. I should have had the notes prepared, but they'll be having a good time and they'll be live streaming from that. So as I always say when wrapping up a show, peace, love, and taco grease, and please stay curious and keep it weird.